Good afternoon. Welcome back. Before we continue with item TE 28.5, 1182 King Street West and 1221 King Street West, I'd like to ask members if they have any quick releases. You want to introduce new business? Okay, you want to hang on tight? I'm going to acknowledge that in a second. Let's see if we can do quick releases first. I believe Councillor Troisi.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. 28.71. I'd like to, the deputy has left and has submitted a letter of support, so I'd like to adopt the staff recommendations.
Okay, all those in favor of the staff recommendations in the report? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. And any other members who have items that they are prepared to release at this point? Okay, seeing none, Councillor Mihevik, I know you want to introduce an item.
An item to introduce, traffic related. Clerk has it.
Nope. Actually, hang on tight. The clerks are not ready for you. Okay, Councillor Mihevik, please introduce your item.
It is a traffic-related item.
And the title of the item is Traffic Regulations in Forest Hill Area.
Correct.
Eglinton Crosstown. Okay, so all those in favor of introducing the item? Any opposed? Thank you. We'll have that circulated by the clerks. Any other members with quick releases? No? Councillor Layton, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. If there are no speakers to TE 28.6, 722, 750, 783 College Street, I'm prepared to just make some brief remarks and allow our planner to go on his way.
Can you, what's the item number, please?
This is TE 28.6, 722, 750, 783 College Street zoning amendment, final report.
Okay, that's the next item on the list anyways. Okay, so why don't we just do this? Let's call for speakers. Are there any members of the public who are here to speak to item number 6, 722, 750, 783 College Street, zoning amendment final report? No? Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I'll move the staff recommendations and thank our planner on the file, Greg Ewens, for his hard work on this. For those who might not be able to read between the lines on this, this is 3 locations on College that are live music locations but don't have the appropriate zoning. They've been in operation for like 2+ decades. I believe El Covento Rico just celebrated their 25th anniversary. It's kind of unfortunate that we have to go do it this way, which is a kind of a temporary rezoning until the recommendations from the Music Advisory Committee go through planning and growth. But I'm kind of tired of meeting with these business owners over and over again to try to find another way to skirt the zoning bylaw. These are good venues in the city. They do their very best to address the concerns that neighbors have, make significant investments in sound attenuation and in the facades of their buildings and in the storage of all the things it takes to run a live music venue. I think that this sets a really good precedent for moving forward on that music file, and I'm happy to move forward the recommendations.
Okay. All those in favor of the recommendations in the report? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. No other quick items. We're heading back to TE 28.5, 1182 King Street West and 1221 King Street West zoning amendment application final report. This is the item that we were dealing with prior to recess. There were 2 members of the public who are on the speakers list who I had called earlier who did not appear. I'm going to call these names again, and this will be your final opportunity to speak. Amir Mohammed. Amir Mohammed. Followed by Claire Helen Hees Boutin. Okay. Are there any other members of the public who are here to speak to this? Please proceed. No strangers to our proceedings. Clock is on your left-hand side.
Behalf of the applicant, This is a proposal that has been through a little over 2-year process with 3 local community information meetings and significant changes to the development throughout the process. The location of the site you've already been told about at King and Dufferin, and the 2 corners opposite to each other, and the address is shown above. And then the existing context with higher density behind the site. It's an area where there's 2 designations. On one site it's regeneration and the other a mixed-use designation. And this is the other site that's before the board, which includes the McDonald's and doesn't include the heritage, but important aspects of the design were to respect the heritage. The current proposal before the board in terms of the design has changed significantly from what originally came through the door a little over two and a bit years ago. If I take you through on the first site, 1182 King West, what you'll see in the bullets that are noted beside are some of the changes that occurred. They included a 4-meter mid-block connection, providing a pedestrian walkway from King Street to Rita Cox Park, live-work units with frontage on the mid-block connection. Southern frontage has an expanded sidewalk for a total walkway space of 7.6 meters. The retail presence was strengthened along the street, and there was a redesign of the residential entrance on Dufferin Street. And in addition to that, which I'll show you in a minute, reductions to the overall height and a change to the design and materiality of the building as a result of the input through the public process. And again, the other site in terms of the ground floor plan, in addition to revisions to the mid-block connection and the sidewalk width and the residential entrances, there was also a contribution to expand the adjacent park, so to provide actually a park expansion on site as opposed to just cash in lieu. And then the elevations from original to current had changed in terms of the proposed height and design and stepping and materiality as a result of input from city staff after the public information meetings, the first 2. And then again, the other site having a reduction from 19 to 14 stories with all the other changes that I showed you. And finally, the original proposal on the 1182, which had a glacier appearance, which then introduced brick and at the base and at the mid-rise component. And again, a similar change to the opposite corner in terms of the design. So an applicant who's listened over 2 and a bit years, I appreciate and understand the comments that came from the community. And as a result of that, there was a request that the Section 37 consensual payments would go towards, for the most part, affordable rental units, which makes sense and is a positive response. And then the other $200,000, again, in consultation with city staff, and again, in response to the input of the community and the community meetings that took place. We are thankful for the iterative process and cooperative process, and thankful for staff in bringing forward a final report, and we support the recommendations in that report that's before you today. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Are there any members with questions for the speaker? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't believe there are any other speakers. I'll just call one final time for item number 5. Any other additional speakers? Seeing none, we're going to bring this right into Community Council. Members with questions of staff, Councillor Perks.
Yeah, I just want to start with a couple of technical questions to make sure that we're not making any mistakes here. There were some issues raised by the deputants I want to clear up. First, to the clerk, did we meet the requirements for statutory notice on this application?
Yes, we did, and I can post the notice if you wish, Councillor.
But all the requirements for posting it and the community and all of that stuff were met?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. To the planning department, this application, as you know, when there's an application, from the day they filed, there's a period. We have to work with them, and then when we get past the period, it's within their rights to appeal if the city doesn't make a decision. Where are we in terms of that timing?
So we are well past the appeal period. This application was submitted in July of 2015. So they could have appealed the application over a year ago if they had chosen to do so.
So if we choose to defer or ask for future studies, it would be within the applicant's right to simply go straight to the Ontario Municipal Board tomorrow?
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you. There was a suggestion that the Section 37 award that, or agreement we've come to is insufficient, and a counter figure of $16 million was raised. In your experience, I know you've done, I don't know, maybe, I won't date you, but it's well into the hundreds. Do you have any precedent for expecting $16 million on a project of this size?
No, we don't.
No. Is the award or the agreement we've come to within the range of what you would expect to be reasonable?
Yes, I think it is. I think it's a fair Section 37, and the applicant has certainly willingly agreed to it.
Okay, thank you. There was a suggestion from one of the applicants around the development charges and how we can allocate them. My understanding is the Development Charges Act places requirements on the city that we have to specify in advance, so much for this kind of stuff, so much for that kind of stuff, and that we can't retroactively come in and allocate it back to a specific neighborhood. That's the provincial law, I understand it correctly?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So those are the technical matters I needed to clear up, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Layton to ask questions.
Yes, thank you very much. This is, I guess, probably to the acting director. The inclusionary zoning, can we mandate affordable housing in a development?
So I am going to defer to legal on this,
Okay,
but we do not have the regulation yet on that.
So yes, what she said, you would require the regulation to be in place by the province, and we don't have that.
So if we were to write a zoning bylaw that said 10% of units would be required to have to be affordable in any measure of affordability, and the applicant decided to appeal that to the board, would that likely be ignored, or would the board member embrace the city taking upon itself the power of inclusionary zoning without a regulation permitting it?
No, they would not embrace that.
So it would likely
Yes.
say, no, the developer isn't required to do so.
That's right. It's if it can be provided for if an agreement is reached to that effect, but it can't be mandated by the city under the current legal regime.
So just
that
to
we're under.
clarify what you just said, if the developer agrees to it, then yes, but the city cannot simply impose it.
Correct. We do not have the authority to impose that.
Okay, and the regulation that needs to be amended?
Or promulgate.
Is it a new regulation that needs to be proposed, or is it an existing one that needs to be amended?
It would be it would be a regulation. I mean, very basic regulation with regard. It would come under the conditional zoning that they've had in the Planning Act for a long time, but they've just never passed a regulation.
So it doesn't have to go through the legislative cycle. It's just a sign of the pen of the minister, and voila.
Yes.
Essential.
Assuming I'm not privy to everything that goes on up there,
Voila.
but yes, it would be. It doesn't have to go through the legislature at this time. It's a regulation from the minister.
So then I'm going to put our acting director of community planning on the spot very quickly and ask, in the last year, how many multi-unit residential units have we approved in the city of Toronto, or in community council, or any measure of multiple unit residential?
So I don't have a exact number, but there have been thousands of residential units that have been approved through council over the past year.
Safe to say 10,000?
That's probably a fair number. Let's say that's in the range, yes.
And as long as we don't have as long as the province hasn't passed the regulation, we can't impose affordability on those projects. But if they did, we could.
That's correct.
Just to planning, how is Section 37 actually calculated? I think there's some mystery around this, and I just the caramel formula. When I've known of it, it's a calculation of some comparables and the number of units, right? Roughly.
So it's not specifically a mathematical formula. What we do look at, there are a number of factors. We look at the value of the real estate, because real estate values do vary significantly across the city. So we want to be fair to people in terms of the value capture for the city. We look at what the need is in the community in terms of facilities that would be required to serve the increased population that an increase in density would cause. And then we take a look at comparables. So we look at other developments, we look at what Section 37s have been negotiated on those to make sure that we're treating the industry fairly and equally across the board.
So you'd look down the street at where we had a settlement at 1030 King, or where we had a board hearing at 1030 King, and that that would be one of maybe a handful of properties that would be used for the comparable?
Exactly. And then there's a negotiation that happens. Obviously, the councillor's office is involved in that conversation, and then it ultimately becomes a negotiated agreement between the city and the developer. It's not something we can mandate. It becomes something that we need the developer to agree to.
And just, if I may, one final question. Have you ever known Councillor Perks to give an inch of height to a developer or let them save a nickel on a 37 or any other agreement that the city has?
Not in my experience.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davis?
Do we have the ability to require that a proposal be rental versus a condominium?
No, we don't. We don't have the ability to secure tenure of residential buildings. We can determine whether a building is residential or non-residential, but we don't have the power to secure tenure.
Do we have any ability to say what kind of market they're attempting to serve?
No, that's
high-end, moderate, anything like that? Are there any levers we have to do that?
No, we don't have any control over the market.
Now, we have been requiring certain number of bedroom units. Maybe you could just clarify what's in this proposal.
This proposal does require a percentage of 3-bedroom and 2-bedroom units as part of this to try and encourage the mix of unit sizes, because we want to make sure the full range of household types can be accommodated. There's a 10%, I believe we're just looking up the numbers.
And 15% for?
10% 3 bedrooms, and then we're at around 20% 2 bedrooms in these projects.
20%. That's pretty high from what I've seen. The other thing, there have been questions about whether this should be mid-rise or tall buildings. I wonder if you could just comment on what are the designations under the official plan, and why are we looking at both mid-rise and tall buildings in assessing these proposals?
So what we did look at was King Street is an avenue, so it does fall within the mid-rise and tall buildings guidelines. We then looked at the amount of density which we thought could be reasonably accommodated on the site, provided that the developer was able to meet our requirements for public realm, sidewalk widths, tower separation, podium heights, sort of looking at the context and how tall the podiums were and how they related to the street. The applicant did come in with taller buildings, which weren't acceptable, and they have brought their buildings down to a range which we think fits in the existing and planned context of the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Bailao, to question.
Yes, so we still don't have the regulation for inclusionary zoning. So can we in any way try to identify how those units or the cost for those units would be, the value of those units? Some deputants talked about the $16.9 million. I mean, can we even try, given that we don't have any of the regulations, we don't know how it's going to be calculated or implemented, the inclusionary zoning, can we even start to attributing a value to these units?
I think that would be difficult to do. I think the only two valuations that would be available to us would be, number one, what would it cost the city to deliver a certain number of units, affordable units? And the other valuation is obviously what is the market value of a unit in a certain location. Otherwise, we don't really have a formula to try and figure out what the value
The
would be.
regulations could come in different ways. There's different ways of implementing inclusionary zoning, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And if we, I noticed you answered to Councillor Perks that you calculated the Section 37, what you believe to be a fair value and in a way that is not appealable to the OMB. Could somebody appeal to the OMB on an unfair calculation of Section 37?
I'll answer it this way. There's certainly been cases where what the city has requested for Section 37 has been turned down by the Ontario Municipal Board. So it can be an issue at the OMB.
So could it be that we lose even what we were able to? It could go down to zero at the OMB? Is that?
Yes, there have been cases where the board has said zero.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members with questions to staff? Okay, I have a quick question, maybe perhaps two. Before us sits a positive planning report with staff supporting the application. And if the applicant was to appeal this to the board, would you be able to defend? They would not be able to, this city solicitor cannot call upon you as our city planner to actually refute the application because you actually support it, is that correct?
That is correct.
So then what would happen if there was a decision to refuse your recommendations here?
So the solicitor on the file would have to conduct a search for any witness that could support the position that we've been asked to take forward to the OMB.
And that third-party witness would have to come from the private sector. It would not be anyone within the city community planning.
Oh, that's correct. Yes.
Division. And if we were to, and so would the applicant's solicitor be able to subpoena the city planner to speak on their behalf and provide testimony in support of their application, if that was the case, if this was brought before the board?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be, yes, to answer your question, they could summons the city planner to attend, but it wouldn't necessarily be in support. They would just be answering questions factually. They wouldn't necessarily be taking a side either way. They would just be a witness.
Right, but based on the report that's written before us, the factual responses that the city planner would provide is that this constitutes, in their opinion, their professional opinion,
Yes.
good planning.
Yes, that's right. I just didn't want it to make it seem like they would go, hand in hand with the developer. That wouldn't be the case. But yes, they would have to answer all those questions honestly and truthfully under oath.
And at the board, should the city, should the applicant prevail and be awarded the zoning, what would happen to the Section 37? Will the community be able to retain the Section 37?
I mean, potentially. It depends on what the developer provides for in their proposal ultimately that goes before the Ontario Municipal Board. But if it's certainly up for grabs, let's put it that way. It's not a guarantee that they would be able to, that it would be achieved.
So it could be lost?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any members with questions? And seeing none, members to speak? Councillor Perks.
So let's start with what went right today. First of all, I am delighted that this community council finally heard some voices from Parkdale on what is happening in terms of the stability of neighborhoods that welcome low-income people in the city of Toronto. We get numb here, approving buildings, approving parks, approving the physical built form of the city, and we forget that actually there is a deep and pervasive crisis. People with low incomes are losing the places where they live, losing the places where they shop, losing the places where they hang out, losing their neighborhoods. Parkdale's been able to resist until now, but now, like many of the neighborhoods where people from any walk of life could live, Parkdale is under threat. So I think it's important that this community council heard that. I'm just disappointed it wasn't the whole city council hearing it. The extent of the crisis that we're facing in terms of affordability and inclusion in the City of Toronto. Also, I just wanted you all to note how smart the people in Parkdale are. We don't often get what we got today. We often just get an argument about parking. This was a real conversation about the kind of city we want to have, and I think that's great. The second thing that went right today is that we proved once again how this form of government is the most open and accessible and accountable. An awful lot of the issues that were raised by the people who spoke today are issues that we don't have control over our city government, but members of the public have nowhere else to raise them. A conversation like today's conversation simply doesn't happen at Queen's Park. You can't just sign up and make members of provincial parliament hear what you need, nor can you do that in Ottawa. So those are things that went right. And I'm glad of that, and I hope that informs the conversations we have about how we plan this city going forward. And I know that all of you on this community council have been strong advocates for a more inclusive city, and I know that you will continue to do that good work. But what's clearly wrong here is that our model of development and housing is broken, not just in the City of Toronto, but in the province of Ontario and in Canada. We have the principal housing agency in Canada, Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Although the federal government talks about how that corporation is going to make more investments in affordability and in inclusion, we have to remember what its principal job is. Public money does not meaningfully go into affordable housing. What the public money that CMHC manages does is underwrite the banks. Everyone who's ever applied for a mortgage knows that the first test is, are you CMHC eligible? And what that means is that the federal government is guaranteeing the banks that if you can't make your mortgage payment, the federal government will pay the banks. They don't pay you, they pay the banks. So the principal lever we have for housing in this country is to guarantee the banks make their money when developments like this happen. That's the main thing CMHC does. That's not a national housing strategy. The next thing that we have to be mindful of, and this is something that's happened well, not in Councillor Cressy's lifetime, but maybe the rest of us, which is the Condominium Act. Councillor Layton, I'd have to go look up your birth date. The Condominium Act did something new in the 70s. So yeah, you're actually not in your lifetime either. Did something new in the 70s, which said that unlike previous land development, we now have a circumstance where you can form a corporation, go in, buy a bundle of land, develop the land, sell it to the condominium corporation, transfer the ownership, take your profit out, and disappear. Prior to the Condominium Act, development didn't work like that. You bought your own home, or if someone built a rental building, the person who built it owned it and stayed there and had an investment in the community. That's another aspect of our housing and land use planning system that is fundamentally broken. When you add to that the Ontario Municipal Board, who quite frankly, I'll be honest, has as its mandate guaranteeing certain property rights. That's part of their mandate, is to guarantee the property rights of landowners to develop their property to the maximum. And they guard that right jealously. And that's why so many of the answers that we heard from staff, can council do this or council do that? The answer was no. So the main thing sitting on top of the decision that we have in front of us today, guarantee that inclusive neighborhoods are under threat and under siege in the City of Toronto. Guarantee that the Parkdale that we have, which quite frankly should be a model of what the city should be. I've always said this, the city needs more Parkdale. Guarantee though, that all those laws guarantee though, that the city isn't going to get more Parkdale. In fact, we're going to have less. So we have a terrible choice in front of us here today. Do we take the agreement that the planning staff, with some advice from the community and from myself, have been able to get, a 15% reduction in the size of one building, a 20% reduction in the size of another building, park money spent on site instead of going into general city coffers, tremendously improved public realm, and $1.9 million to buy affordable housing, rental housing, I want to stress that, in Parkdale. Socially owned housing, not something stuck in the middle of a condo without access to the amenities that the members of the condo corporation have, but actual quality rental housing within Parkdale. Do we put all of that at risk and hope that the OMB gives us a better deal? Well, we all know the OMB won't give us a better deal than that. We don't get to make the decision today about whether the City of Toronto continues to be inclusive, makes progress even, hopefully, someday on inclusivity. We don't get to decide that. We get to pick between what staff are recommending and what we're afraid the OMB will do. I hate it. I hate that I have to tell my community no. I hate that I have to tell these passionate, smart, creative activists who love and believe in the vision of Toronto that we share on this community council no. I hate that I have to tell them no. But in this case, the best interest of the community is to pick the option where we take the agreement we've got, which is better than what we would get if we said no today. So I'm encouraging you to support the staff recommendation. Thank you for hearing me out. I know I went a little bit over time, but this one matters to me.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any questions of the mover? You are moving the recommendations in the staff report. Okay. Yes. Okay, no questions. Councillors to speak, Matlow and then Cressy.
So what I heard today from the deputants was that they love their community. They want it to remain inclusive and affordable. And they are incredibly concerned about not only this development, but also what it, I think, symbolizes, which is a gentrification of a community that will make it not only less affordable, but unaffordable for so many people who call it home and who have lived there for decades. So their anger and their upset is justified. And I listened to what Councillor Perks said a moment ago. And what I'm hearing from Councillor Perks is undeniable. That if Councillor Perks could stop any gentrification in this community, he would. Councillor Perks is the most militant left-winger I've ever met in my life.
Oh, no, you met some more.
I met some more here. but I just know that Councillor, I was actually just speaking to my staff over the lunch break about the protest that happened earlier when some of the active members of the community who are so furious about what has been proposed here took over this room and put up a banner. Well, Gord Perks, on July 30th, 1990, when David Peterson was running for election, walked up to the Premier of Ontario with a briefcase handcuffed to his hand and started playing a recording of the promises that were made and what Gord said were broken. We're broken.
They were.
I'm a liberal. I was speaking conditionally. Excuse me. So my point is that I'm of the belief that if Gord had a legislative tool in his hand to say this must all be affordable housing, he would use it today. If he had any belief that the developer wouldn't go to the board and get more of everything they asked, less of what Gord was able to get them to compromise on, that there was any possibility that he could restrict them from trying to get the board to remove the Section 37 that should go and invest in the community, he would. He would do everything he could. What Gord is doing is choosing a very hard path here, which is, Councillor Perks rather, is choosing a very hard path. He could simply say to his community, I'm going to lead this protest to the point where we're going to lose every concession we made and we're going to get none of the Section 37 and we're going to get this gentrification anyway, or I'm going to fight to make this the best that I can and continue pushing back. One last thing I'll say about Councillor Perks, because I'm confident in his love for Parkdale. If you ever see a recording of what he did, that David Peterson incident that I'm referring to, the only time I've seen his blood boil even more is when Councillor Mammoliti said some disgusting comments about the Parkdale community, and Councillor Perks was, let's just say, he went to bat for Parkdale. So I really respect the work that he's done. I respect the fact that he's able to be honest with his community. That's what every elected official should do. even when it's really hard to tell the truth. So therefore, he's earned my confidence and my support today.
Thank you, Councillor Mallow. Councillor Cressy to speak.
Yeah. Let me begin, first of all, by thanking the deputants and residents of Parkdale, not only for coming out and speaking, but also for the unwavering commitment to inclusion and equity that was shown here today. And I want to equally recognize and thank Gord, Councillor Perks, for that same commitment to equity and inclusion always. I think the discussion we're having today and what we've heard from others raises broader issues related to housing supply, related to affordability and equity, related to the impact of rising property values and gentrification. These are issues certainly in my downtown ward, in neighborhoods like Kensington Market, the Grange and Chinatown, that we struggle with every day. And I think in discussing these issues, it exposes many of the limitations that we feel here at the city every day. Limitations related to the absence of inclusionary zoning and our ability to mandate equity. Limitations such as the absence of our ability to assess taxes for small and independent businesses at a different rate than large businesses, and the reality of the planning framework that we exist under. And so this city, as we've heard from people again and again today, we desperately need many things. We desperately need more affordable housing. We do. We desperately need stronger measures to protect small and independent businesses so that we don't just end up with big boxes. We do. We also need a range of more housing options for the next generation, that just as we need more affordable housing options, we also need more diverse housing options, because the next generation ain't buying homes in downtown Toronto. Supply is not there, they're too expensive, and they're not going to buy. And so we need affordable housing, we need stronger protections for taxes, we need more housing writ large. And as a city, the answer is not to grow out. The answer is not to prevent development only at the expense of the Greenbelt. The answer is to grow up. But the problem is the development model that exists is broken in terms of the type of development we can mandate as we grow up, as we build up. Because we should be able to mandate affordable housing. It is the formal position of this council, and certainly Councillor Perks, that inclusionary zoning should be in place. The province of Ontario could authorize it tomorrow through a signature, through regulatory approval, without even legislative approval. They haven't, and we don't have the authority on our own. The city should be able to assess taxes under MPAC. We should have the power to have a different assessment model for small and independent businesses on main streets. We don't. That requires provincial changes. And to be honest, and I think we have to recognize this, if this was city-owned land, I'm sure Councillor Perks would have a whole shopping list of items that he'd like to do with the land if it was ours to develop, but we don't own it. And so we're operating under rules that we disagree with, but that's where we are. And it's to that end that I have the complete and total faith in Councillor Perks, in his unwavering commitment to equity and inclusion, just as I have the complete and total faith in the commitment of the residents of Parkdale to fight for those things that we're fighting for too, so that in the future we can do better and build the development model that we also desperately need. And on that basis, I will be supporting Councillor Perks. I want to commend him for fighting for Parkdale always. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cressy. Can I please invite Councillor McMahon to speak?
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the residents for their incredible deputations today. Articulate, passionate, compassionate, inclusive, enthusiastic, and incredibly knowledgeable. And one deputant seemed angry that we weren't asking questions, but we didn't need to, because your deputations were so thorough and so clear, and the messaging was incredible. So that's why there weren't a lot of questions. When I first was elected, I fought a development on Kingston Road with my residents, and we lost at the OMB. And we didn't work with the developer at all. We just fought it, and my community, the Residents Association, was in the hole and may still be in the hole, $75,000. So what I learned then was that we need to work with the developer as best we can, and work with the councillor for the art of possible. And I'll tell you, your councillor, Councillor Perks, He fights for inclusivity, for everything you were passionate about today. That is him. And he, in his former life, as you know, he was an extreme activist, and I would say still is, and I would say he is probably the only councillor here who's been arrested for his activism. Oh, okay.
The only one arrested
But twice. Arrested in this building. So I would just say that he's fighting the good fight for you, and he's, from what I've seen today with your passion and your activism, that he is the perfect councillor to represent Parkdale. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bailao.
Thank you. All of us have been here for a few years, and I think all of us will agree that this job has incredible moments and that we feel extremely rewarded. And it has moments like when we were listening some of the deputants of extreme frustration. And I think that we're all feeling this frustration with, as Councillor Perks called it, the terrible choice that is in front of us. Because I think most of us agree with everything that the deputants said, and everything that we do to push for reform of the OMB, to push for bringing more affordable housing, to push for better taxation system. But at the same time, we're faced day in and day out with the daily decisions of an approval that comes in front of us, somebody asking for housing and at risk of become homeless, that, you know, you have to tell them to their face that, you know, there's 90,000 households on a waiting list, and it just infuriates you, because it doesn't matter how much you're working and all those units that we're still producing, it's still a drop in the bucket, and it takes years to come, and you have to face the human side of this argument, and that's what we faced here today. It was the human side of the reform of the OMB and the inequality. We faced the human face right here, that the impact that these things have in our neighborhoods and in our residents, and that's why it's a real tough decision, but that we can't lose the little that we have today in this application while trying to work for the bigger good. It's a two-track work that needs to continue to be done. We need to continue having the conversations with our community, and I agree totally. I wish we had Parkdale communities all over, because if these voices were louder across the city, I think we would be a lot more successful in a lot of these things that we're advocating for, that will actually bring that inclusiveness and that equality that we all want. So I will be supporting the report. Once again, you know, Councillor Perks, I know this is a very difficult decision for you, but once again, you did what you deep inside felt it was the right thing for your community. It didn't matter how tough it was, and I think for that, all of us in this that do this work in politics need to thank you for that, because we should do that every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, I'm just going to speak very briefly that this, of course, is a Sophie's choice because of the hand that we've been dealt. The OMB hand, the planning hand that we have in the City of Toronto, where we're forced into taking what we can get rather than losing everything. I'd say that is a Sophie's choice. If we didn't have the constraint of the OMB, if we had the planning regime that they have in Vancouver, we would not have somebody overseeing everything that we do and able to make decisions. We don't have that. We have another party that oversees everything that we do, that any developer can take anything to at any time, and generally is very successful. So that is a sad, again, reminder that that's our venue, that's our circle, that's the context in which we work. And just as everybody here doesn't like that context, None of us like that context, except for those who might be representing developers here who have something and big money that they're planning to make in the city. So social inclusion is so important, and I just want to thank everybody for raising that. We don't hear that very often here. I've heard that in my community for the Leslieville Planning Study for our part of Queen Street. It actually is part of our Leslieville Planning Study. The city initiated the official plan amendment to add the shelter to the condo. There are ways to do that, but there's so few. But social inclusion, it's there because just like Parkdale, residents of the older part of the city feel very strongly about social inclusion. They see people being swept out. They see businesses being closed that cater to everyday people and the poor. They see houses being flipped. They see a community that's changing in front of their eyes and just don't know what to do and feel very powerless. So we've talked about affordable housing, which is not very affordable anymore in my part of town, and I don't know how to get more affordable housing, not more developer-driven big profit housing. But we do have a bigger issue here. OMB reform is very important. We shouldn't give up on social inclusion as part of planning. It wasn't easy to get social inclusion into the planning document. Our planning staff didn't think it had a place there because that's not how people think of planning. We have to push around the edges, all of us here, because the developers don't want social inclusion. They simply want to make money, build tall buildings. We are the voices to make a difference for people in the City of Toronto. I don't know how Toronto and East York Community Council can contribute to this conversation, but collectively, we have to find a way to contribute. You know, we deal with the fences, we deal with so many little variances, we're dealing with how much density, what is the setback, what's the angular plane. Somehow, we also have to deal with people and social inclusion, and we haven't done that. Many times, you know, we've had these meetings before. We had big casino meetings at City Hall, called by our community council. We've had, when they put the fees up for kids, we had big meetings. Maybe we should just have a big meeting, Toronto and East York meeting, about social inclusion and how we're going to bake that in to development. Because today is such an important day to say, whatever we're doing now isn't working for social inclusion. So, my friends, I'd like us to think about how we can take a step as well as a committee. Not in approving the planning. There's no way around that unless we lose everything. I think everybody understands that. But what other steps can we take that force this issue out further? And I'd be happy to work with you, Councillor Perks, to figure that out.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Fragedakis.
So I'll be brief in my remarks. First of all, I want to take an opportunity to thank the deputants for coming out. In fact, looking and hearing at the deputants, I actually expected Councillor Perks to go and sit in the deputant's chair and depute to us, because that's the Gord that I know these many years. But you know, he's made a lot of great speeches in this building, in this circle, and upstairs in the chamber. Comments today, though, I think were the most spot on that I've heard. Things like we have a deep and pervasive crisis. We have the development and housing model in this city is broken. Inclusive neighborhoods are under siege. All of those things, we know those things to be true. We do need OMB reform. I'm not sure that the reform we're going to get is actually going to be the reform that we like, because I'm not entirely convinced even that the TLAB is going to be to our liking once we start to see some of the decisions that are going to come out of that. But you know, I'm made, you know, like Councillor McMahon said, in her first years in this role, I too, in my first years, made a decision to stand with the community and fight all the way to the OMB and see us lose everything on the chance that we took because we stood our ground. And I know that others here have also done that, probably in the earlier years, and so you try to find a balance going forward. with one hand tied behind your back to make decisions that are in the best interests of the residents that we represent. And it's not an easy thing to do, and it doesn't make you feel all that happy because you only got the best that you could get, not the best that was possible given the circumstances that we find ourselves in this city and in this province. So I look forward to the OMB reform. I hope it's what we want, and it's the reform of our dreams.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Speaker. This has been, I think, one of the most interesting items we've had on this agenda for some time, and it has given voice to a community to express collectively the view that planning can't be divorced, or land use planning should not be divorced from social planning, and that the built infrastructure has to be considered in the context of the social infrastructure that is needed. And that is a question that we've been struggling with, not just the social infrastructure, but the green space and all the transit, all of the other features that contribute to building a healthy neighborhood and a healthy city. And we don't have the ability to deal with those issues either. What do we get? We get a Section 37 contribution that is never enough to do anything of any real significance. We get Section 42 and parkland acquisition, and I have to say that both the Section 37 and the parkland dedication here, and the fact that there is parkland included in here was an achievement. I'm not sure that that's been noted. And we have development charges. None of this can pay for the kind of social and green infrastructure, public spaces, public realm improvements that we need to build a great city. And you know, I heard, and it's very legitimate, this is neighborhood improvement area, and that should be acknowledged. And we do have a plan for investing in those neighborhoods. But if you look at what we're investing, it is peanuts to what is really required. And frankly, the affordable, what is being proposed here is to put what amounts are available under Section 37 into the greatest priority. I think that was articulated by the community and was articulated here today, and that was affordable housing. So the money that we do have that comes out of the development process is going to affordable housing. Are there other needs? I saw pre-employment and an equity impact approach or an assessment. Other issues that should be addressed for Parkdale, yes, they should be addressed. And I hope that you'll stay engaged, because when the budget comes and we're determining how much we're prepared to invest in our neighborhood improvement areas and in grants, in social and recreational infrastructure and programming, you have a voice, and I encourage you to come out and talk about those things as well. And I agree with Councillor Fletcher. We have to figure out a way that uses the planning process to talk about maintaining healthy downtown neighborhoods. We do not want the Manhattanization of Toronto. I know it's happening. And all of us know that mixed income neighborhoods are healthy neighborhoods. They are the kind of neighborhoods I think everyone around this table wants to make sure that we protect over the long term. You know, I represent the area at the furthest east end along the Danforth, and it's coming east. We're going to see all this same kind of development that pushes out newcomer community, business people who have affordable rents for their small businesses in the older buildings, and mixed use with retail at grade that's beyond the reach of those people. So these are problems, for sure, and you have reinforced for us that these are problems we have to continue to work on solving. So thank you. And I will be supporting the recommendations that are before us.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else to speak? No?
Anyone left?
I haven't spoken, but would you like to speak? Okay. I'll just make some quick remarks as well. I want to thank the community for coming out to provide us with your passionate deputations. I think that it was a lesson for everyone sitting in the chambers today to just hear how incredibly compassionate you were, and also about how much enthusiasm you have for your communities. This is not necessarily always the easy decision, but it's one that we have to make. We don't get to choose a maybe button. We don't get to really do much else. But I wanted to just sort of share with you in Ward 27, which is oftentimes the big battleground for the big towers. If 14 or 17 stories is big, then the ones that we live with in downtown communities are sitting at 75, 85, 95, 100 stories now. And the battle there in trying to even introduce affordable housing is at a tone that is pitched over here. And I know Councillor Cressy and Councillor Troisi would understand what that's going to look like. When we have gone to the board where we felt that we had a strong case, including the planning staff felt that it was not a good planning document, that it was not a supportable application, we have lost. And this is with all the confidence of the planning staff marching into the Ontario Municipal Board thinking there's no way we could lose because they wrote a refusal report. It was not good planning. We lost and we got shadows on the park. We lost affordable housing. We lost at the OMB and we lost streetscape improvements. We lost the wider sidewalks. We lost parkland additions. We lost heritage assets. And of course, those are battles that are then felt by the community for some time to come. And that's with an application that we thought was a bad application, just garbage planning, don't even come in, it's not a tall building site, get out of our face. And the OMB agreed with the developer, and the applicant prevailed. And so these OMB battles are real, and when Councillor Mallow and I sometimes stand up and say we want to be removed, Toronto should be removed from the purview of the OMB, this is what it comes down to. And no one should roll their eyes when we actually make those speeches, because it gets back down to this critical issue of why can the city not make local planning decisions and make them stick, and then lead those local planning decisions with the values that we have. Councillor Perks will be, and I asked him what is he planning to do with the Section 37 fund, which actually goes back to the local community. He wants to purchase rooming houses. And he wants to protect vulnerable communities in those rooming houses because they would be next. Now, I'll tell you that there are other councillors across City Council that would never even think, never even contemplate, not even for 1 second, using Section 37 dollars to go buy rooming houses in their community so that they can keep them as rooming houses. There are other councillors that will do everything they can to get rid of the rooming houses. Don't put in a shelter, don't put in transitional homes, don't put in housing with supports, get it all out of my neighborhood. That's not Councillor Perks. Councillor Perks also stands up on the floor of council and defends every single dollar store on King Street. He defends every single cheap watering hole where you can go get a cheap beer. In most other communities, that would just never happen. He's doing everything he can to try to make sure that Parkdale retains its wonderful eclectic history and culture. And he does that with tremendous pressures coming in from the restaurant bar industry, with tremendous pressures coming in from the development industry. And so I'm very convinced, based on what I've heard today, that there's not another choice before us. And I will also be supporting the recommendations in the staff report. Thank you very much. Members are ready to vote. All those in favor of the recommendations in the staff report? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Yes, so there's a request to defer an item for Councillor Fragedakis. Councillor, I yield the floor to you.
Yes, and I have given this to staff. It's item TE 28.25. It's a front yard parking appeal at 121 Browning Avenue. The applicant has emailed me and emailed staff in an attempt to defer this item till January as they are unable to be here today.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. All those in favor of the deferral? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. Okay, we are coming to TE 28.7, Rail Deck Park, City-Initiated Official Plan Amendment Final Report, Ward 20. I recognize that staff do have a presentation. I think we're going to hear from staff first, and then we will proceed to the deputants. Any members of the public who would like to speak to this item or any other item on the agenda, please see the clerk, and we'll update your, we'll put your name on the speakers list.
Oh, thanks.
If I can please have the voices in the room kept to a minimum, we're ready to hear a presentation from staff. It was meant to get you to be quieter, not louder. Okay, so Linda, the floor is yours. You've got some time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of Community Council, I wanted to do a brief presentation on the proposed official plan amendment for Rail Deck Park. That's the area on the screen running from Bathurst Street up to Blue Jays Way, south of Front Street to the City Place neighborhood. We see this as a real city building opportunity, as I think City Council does, to do something which is really future building and building for that city that we're moving towards. We've been working on this for a number of years, starting with the Downtown Trends, Issues and Intensification Report in 2014, moving through our TO core proposals, looking at parks, to Mayor Tory's announcement last summer. And then over the last year, staff have been working diligently on moving forward on the planning analysis for the park official plan amendment, and also on the implementation strategy, which will come forward to the November meeting of Executive Committee. As part of that process, we've done a whole range of community engagements. We've had a total of over 500 people at 2 community meetings, and generally they're overwhelmingly supportive of the Rail Deck Park initiatives. One of the things that came up, and I will touch on very briefly, is there were many questions about about the private development application. What does that mean, and how does it compare to the park proposal that the city is looking at? A couple of questions. The park, Rail Deck Park, as proposed in this official plan amendment, is 8.8 hectares. That includes the Northern Linear Park, which the city owns, and Mouth of the Creek Park, also owned by the city. The private proposal has said that they will meet the requirements of Section 42 of the Planning Act, which would generate, in their opinion, about 1.47 hectares of parkland, with the option for that to be expanded through other lands that the city acquired. In terms of what it would look like, quick view looking down Telegram Muse, which is looking north from the City Place neighborhood. On the left-hand screen is the park potential. On the right-hand screen is the development which would be behind their proposed open space. Looking south on Draper Street, you see the park, you see the building development which would be fronting onto Front Street. And then looking west from Front Street from Spadina, the park as potentially proposed, and the development which would front onto Front Street. Moving on, one of the main reasons for pursuing this is because of the amount of growth that's happened in the downtown. There's Rail Deck Park proposed in the yellow in this slide, and you can see the change in the amount of development in the city over the last 10 years. This is the real impetus for us needing to have a new large park in the downtown. Today, we have about 7 large parks serving the downtown area with a very strongly growing population, which is expressed by the fact that the downtown has less than a third of the parkland provision of the city looked at as a whole. This is really just one of our heat maps. You can see the darker orange is where we have the lowest parkland provision in the downtown area as of today, and that obviously is changing, becoming less. Rail Deck Park, you can see towards the bottom of the slide in the blue. The research we've done has shown this really is the last opportunity for us to achieve a large park in the downtown. We have achieved a number of small parks through development applications, but for something over 3 hectares, this really is our last chance. It means we have a place where we can do many things in one large park, and that people can gather and carry out many activities. If you can imagine a place where you could actually fit in Grange Park, Sherburne Common, the playing fields at Regent Park, Dundas Square, Nathan Phillips Square, David Pico Square, all of those could happen in one place and can all be combined to create a major event space for the city. So the output of all of the work that we've been doing over the last year is a proposal for a new secondary plan area called the Rail Deck Park Secondary Plan. It includes the rail corridor, the existing Northern Linear Park, and the mouth of the Creek Park. It excludes the Metrolink site, but obviously will be closely connected to the proposed RER station at Front and Spadina. Official Plan Amendment effectively creates this new secondary plan, carving it out of the existing Railway Lands Planning Framework, designates the entire site as parks and open space. It will protect for the Union Station rail corridor and the RER station, and provide some pretty significant new connections from the downtown into this park and across to the waterfront, and will be accompanied by outlines the requirements for us to have a public realm and implementation strategy for us to move forward to actually build the park. The major policies in the plan focus on a vision of this as being a major signature park for the city, the region, and for visitors to the region. And then we have 5 major objectives. Identifying this as a park for all of Toronto, for all of the residents in the community. Connectivity and accessibility are a key element of the park. Not only do we connect north to south to the downtown communities on the waterfront, but it provides one of the missing links in the stitch that we've been talking about through TO Core on connecting to the east and the west also. The third objective is creating a place where we can have major celebrations as a city. One of the important elements will be creating that green infrastructure, creating a very sustainable park that helps to address some of the challenges that we're facing as a city. And then we're going to deal with supporting and integrating rail. There's nothing that this park will do based on the work we've done that will interfere with the Union Station rail corridor and the commuter rail into the heart of the city. And finally, we want to acknowledge the importance of the rail corridor and the history of the railways to the growth of Toronto. So the future we're hoping that we will protect for by approving a new official plan amendment is that we could have a place like this in the downtown, looking from Bathurst Street, and a new piece of green infrastructure through the center of the city, which becomes one of the generational opportunities for the city moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for their presentation. Or actually, we'll hold on to questions for staff until afterwards. What we'll do is we'll hear from the deputants now. Mario Coutinho. Mario Coutinho. Okay. Next speaker is Margarita Isaskor. Hi, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm going to set the clock for you. When you Isakov? Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Okay. My apologies for mispronouncing your name. It was spelled very oddly here. When you're ready, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. I think a lot of good points have already around the needs of Toronto, the density, the growth that's been going on in our immediate area. I live on 550 Front Street. So what will happen to my view is I will not have one because I'm south-facing. And I actually bought this home because there would be no possibility of development in front of me and because we grow a garden and we will be losing all of that. We'll have no sunlight and we will have no sky. Thank you for Councillor Cressy, who made a very impassioned presentation at the Renaissance Hotel. And we are very pro Rail Deck Park. We apparently have over 4,000, let me see now, 4,017 signatures currently on change.org that is supporting the Rail Deck Park. And we are rising by the minute. So this is something that is very, very important to all of us in my community and the buildings in our neighborhood as well as Draper Street. And I hear a lot of what's going on here as far as the hand tied behind your back. And at first I thought of it as sort of, is there complacency? Is there a little bit of kowtowing to the OMB? But I think now that I've heard all of you speak, this is not really the case. I did email quite a few of my politicians in the Councillor Cressy. You've heard from me, Sue McAlpine, the city planner, and thank you to Councillor Cressy that you. I felt at first a little bit disappointed that you did pass me along to the Member of Parliament, Ms. Han Dong, but I took your advice. So I got a letter here from Han Dong MPP for Trinity Spadina, dated October 24th, and maybe this might be the solution to everyone's problems, hopefully, in the future. What is before the House right now is Bill 139, Building Better Communities and Conserving Watersheds Act, 2017. If passed, this act will reform the OMB into the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, also known as LPAT. Currently, the Planning Act requires approval authorities and the Ontario Municipal Board to make decisions relating to planning matters, to have regard to decisions of municipal councils and approval authorities. And if passed, Bill 139 will change the Act and give the city full authority to handle appeals regarding development applications. Through you, Madam Chair, maybe you, Councillor Cressy, can speak to where we are at in the timeline of this. If anyone here at the council has heard of this this bill, and what the future might hold as far as getting the Rail Deck Park built, when there's going to be the issue of the OMB overriding the opposition of the local residents.
Thank you very much for those remarks. Are there any questions? No? Thank you. Maxime Isaac? Do we have a Maxine Isaac here to speak? No? Are there any other members of the public who are here to speak to this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll just bring this into the Community Council. Questions for staff? Councillor McMahon.
Well, you've covered this, but I just wanted you to do a little more justice on if you can explain exactly how parkland deprived the downtown is and why the need for rail deck.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the downtown is one of the lowest parkland areas, is the highest, I guess, deficient areas, having the lowest parkland quantum. And in large part, that's because about 90% of the sites in the downtown are small sites under half a hectare. So getting on-site parkland contributions really isn't feasible because the park would be too small. Then we revert to our cash and lieu policies, which frankly are about 10 years old. And we have a cap that limits the contributions from cash and lieu, and we have a competitive, expensive land market in the downtown. You put all of those together, and you have difficulty finding sites that are large enough. As Ms. McDonald said, there's very few sites over a hectare in the downtown for us to purchase. The need for a large site is quite important. We're able to get pops and very small parkettes. And so the downtown not only has a parkland need, but it has, in particular, it has a large parkland need. So with that intensification and growth that we've seen, and with the projected growth in terms of a doubling of the downtown population, hence you have the parkland needs and the need to make sure that our growth and infrastructure align.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cressy, to question.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to City Planning. So last year, Council directed City staff to pursue 2 tracks. One was to proceed with looking at the costing, the engineering, the structural analysis, the phasing approach for Rail Deck Park. And I understand that is coming forward in a report to Executive Committee later this month. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so what is in front of us here today is the second track, which staff were directed to proceed with, and that is the development of this OPA, which will designate the lands above the rail the area above the rail corridor as parkland and open spaces. Is that right?
That is correct.
And so, in effect, this protects for the future the possibility of Rail Deck Park, whether it is built yesterday, today, tomorrow, or 20 years from now.
That's right. It's definitely a long-term plan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cressy. Councillor Matlow to question.
We've all been hearing about Rail Deck Park since the mayor announced it as a city priority. But this isn't a new idea, is it? This has been bandied about for many years, has it not, in one way, shape, or form with different names?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, it came through TO Core that basically was initiated in 2014 through the Parks and Public Realm Plan. So we articulated the need for a large park, and frankly, if you turn your mind to it, there's very few sites that offer that opportunity,
I mean,
so it was identified.
I'm asking, even before this term of office, this isn't like a brand new idea.
It has come up over time, time and time again. Yes, it has.
Why weren't steps taken many years ago to take action on those ideas? Why now rather than then? Do you know?
I would say that what our priority had been in the downtown to look at advancing the parkland along the waterfront and basically in building some of those connections, and those opportunities have come to fruition. And the downtown has grown significantly, grown 50,000 in the past 5 years. That's unprecedented in terms of the rate of growth compared to the rest of the city and even GTA.
Have there ever been any specific recommendations from staff about how to fund this so that if we are able to see it through to fruition? Because I've heard the mayor, for example, make announcements about how this is a priority, this is important, but I've never heard and this is what we're going to do to fund it. Are there any kind of rational, functional steps that we can take to make sure that we don't just talk about it, but we actually see it through to fruition?
That will be the subject of the report that will be going to Executive Committee in November.
But are there specific recommendations?
That report will cover the approach around funding strategy for a project of this size.
Are there any suggestions that you can share today?
I think it would be best to see it through the context of the report. It's an interdivisional report that will be being prepared and for Council's consideration at the same time that this OPA will be before.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? I have maybe 2 questions that are rather technical. Before us is a report that's rezoning the air rights over the rail lands. That's what we're rezoning.
So it's effectively, it's an official plan amendment.
Yes, sorry, yeah.
And what it does is it redesignates the area above the rail corridor to allow for a park, to protect for a park use, but still allows all of the transportation function of the rail corridor to continue to exist so that we don't affect that at all.
Does the City of Toronto own any of the rail lands?
The city owns, there are certain parcels that we own. The majority of the rail corridor itself is owned by Metrolinx at ground level or at track level. The city owns land to the north, Front Street, and then there's a 14-foot strip to the south of Front Street owned by us. We actually own the air that the Puente de Luz sits in. And then on the southern side, there's kind of a strata title arrangement in terms of the pieces of the Northern Linear Park, because parts of the condominium garage go underneath that. And then the mouth of the Creek Park is entirely owned by the City of Toronto.
So does the city have the, I mean, are we able to initiate OPA amendments on properties that are not our own? Because this is actually very interesting to me from a technical point of view. I'm just curious to know if there's a big parking lot in my local community, can I ask you to initiate a city OP on that parking lot, even though we don't own the lands, to protect it one day for affordable housing, for example?
That is correct. The city has that right.
Yeah. So thank you very much. And so just my final question, and I don't want to keep on this for too long. Can you help me reconcile the difference between the application that has gone in for that for the private development known as PITS versus what we are doing today? I'm trying to understand how the two line up together.
So there are two different applications. So we have the city-initiated application, which was council's request that we look at this area becoming a major park, and that's the report you have before you. The private application is still under review. Effectively, what they're proposing is that there be private development along the northern side of the rail corridor. Basically, if you split it down the middle, east to west, there would be private development, residential, and office on the northern side, and that it still leaves the southern half as potentially being open space or parkland.
My final question is that if the OPA amendment goes through Community Council successfully on its way to City Council adopts it, there is no challenge at the Ontario Municipal Board, does that mean that the PIPS application is then deemed as redundant? Because obviously, if once we've created a designated green space, we can't be processing their application anymore.
So the PITS application is in, and we do have to finish our review, and we will be bringing a report forward early in 2018 with a full planning analysis and recommendations to council on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Councillors to speak?
Well, first of all, I want to thank our city staff for the work on this. If you took the time to look at the report, it is 102 pages for this OPA. That's the level of study, depth, and analysis that has gone into the development and the recommendation towards this OPA, and I want to thank our city staff for all their hard work. I also want to recognize and thank the thousands of residents. You heard from one deputant here today who alluded to the one petition that's out there of just local residents. They started a petition. I discovered it after 2,000 people had signed it. But to the thousands of residents who have emailed, who have called, who've attended our formal meetings on this OPA. And as well, I want to recognize the Chair of Parks and Environment, who has been at most of these meetings herself, coming into downtown for them, Councillor McMahon. I will just say, first of all, in this room, I don't have to convince colleagues of the importance writ large of parks and public spaces to livability and sustainability. We all live and breathe that work in this room here. And as you all know, these spaces become even more critical and important as we increasingly live in vertical communities, because these spaces become the backyards and the living rooms and playrooms of families. So why are we doing this? Why are we doing an OPA right now? Simply, this is about protecting and building for the future. That's what this is. This is an OPA. So why are we protecting and building for the future? 15 years ago, the population of downtown Toronto, encompassing wards 27, 28, and Ward 20, was 113,000 people. Today it is 250,000 people. That's a doubling in 15 years. In 25 years, it will be 500,000 people, a doubling yet again. And this is, as the OPA, the proposed OPA is outlined, the last remaining opportunity in all of downtown for a large continuous signature public space. And our public spaces, yes, we need pocket parks. They're important for livability, but the large signature, the large public spaces to have passive and active animation serve a different purpose, not just for neighborhoods and community building, but certainly for citywide building from a destination point of view. There is not 21 acres anywhere else. Unless we start tearing down buildings to assemble them to create 21 acres in downtown, it doesn't exist, and thus we have to be creative. And so what's in front of us today is simply the OPA. This is a long process, as we're aware, but today is about adopting the OPA to designate the rail corridor, the land above the air and the land above the tracks, as parks and open space, to allow the continuous movement of trains at grade. Later this month, a report will be coming forward, as Council has directed, to the Executive Committee, which looks at engineering, structural analysis, details, costing, phasing, the funding sources that I'm glad Councillor Matlow has brought up, because these ideas can't come out of thin air. They have to be driven through prioritization. And so we will see that coming forward later this month, and you've seen 102 pages here on the OPA. Wait until you see how many pages are coming in those collective reports. So the adoption by Community Council today, and hopefully by Council next month, of the proposed OPA does not mean that Rail Deck Park will be built tomorrow. It doesn't mean that it will be built in 2 years, anything but. What it means, however, is that it will protect the possibility for the development of Rail Deck Park for the future. That's what this OPA does. That's why it's so critical. We are not making a decision here today as a community council on whether to spend money to build Rail Deck Park. We are making a decision today to protect the potential for Rail Deck Park to come into the existence in the future by virtue of its new designation as parkland. So I know this is a big project, and we will have many more discussions and debates. Certainly, I know Toronto is growing, as we all do, and we critically need to invest in our parks and open spaces, just as we need to invest in affordable housing and transit. This cannot be an either-or equation. This has to be about expanding the pie to invest in all the things we need to build the city we want. Rail Deck Park, in my view, is part of it, but today I ask for your support so that we can designate the air as parkland and open space to protect for that possibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Matlow.
So first of all, I want to acknowledge Councillor Cressy's leadership on this priority, and I support this being a priority for every reason that I won't reiterate that Councillor Cressy spoke about. And I too, in areas like the Yonge and Eglinton area, which is incredibly deficient in park space, are always struggling to look for every inch of land that we can dedicate to green space. We've been successful, but we need a lot more. And the same rings true for the downtown residents. But I want to bring up, this may sound odd, but I want to bring up centipedes and butterflies. The reason I refer to centipedes and butterflies is because, there's the old saying about the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. In the city, it's like a centipede not knowing what its many hands and feet don't know what they're doing, and they're not working in concert with each other. Our leadership is saying, on one hand, we need more money for affordable housing. We need to build the relief subway line to decrease the congestion that we currently have in our existing subway system. And now we need to move forward on critically important public realm initiatives like Rail Deck Park. The other hand is that the council is deliberately wasting billions of dollars on one subway stop in Scarborough in lieu of a fully funded plan to provide more transit for more people for far fewer dollars. What we've done, though, to facilitate that politically driven project is that we have now raised our debt by $1 billion. We've increased taxes, property taxes, to fund something that is unnecessary when there was a better plan for those residents. And speaking of the debt, we've now scratched our city's self-imposed debt ceiling. Why is what I'm saying in order on this subject? Because when we make those decisions, and this comes to the butterfly, The effect is that then we have fewer dollars for our actual priorities, whether it be public realm or transit or housing or all the other things that we've debated today. So we can't have it both ways. We either be responsible with every dollar we have and thoughtful about the fact that it came from all of our pockets to be able to fund our priorities and then follow through with our priorities and see them through to fruition, or we don't. But we can't say that we are and then waste money. You can't have it both ways. That's what's happening today. So my challenge to all of us as a council is that if we want to see Rail Deck Park through to fruition, to create one of the greatest legacy public realm projects in Toronto's history, then we cannot deliberately blow billions of dollars on politically driven projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you very much. I again want to commend staff on all their hard work on this, living and breathing and eating this file. And Councillor Cressy, who is, I've seen him in action. He's something to be seen at community consultations. Very passionate. But the extensive outreach that's been done on this project already, on this idea, loudly and clearly is telling us about the need for green in downtown. And you heard from staff as to how parkland deprived the downtown is. Sometimes when we're in our own pockets, we don't realize that. In wonderful Ward 32, we're very spoiled. We have a beach, a lake that you can actually swim in, and about 25 parks. So come on down to our neck of the woods for some green, but let's also support green in other areas. As you see on the screen, once in a lifetime opportunity for this. It's not a new idea. Chicago has Millennium Park. New York City has High Line. And it's been done before. I'm sure there was controversy over those large-scale green spaces, but they exist now. People had the tenacity and the backbone to and forward thinking to help see them through to fruition, to great success. So it's crazy to throw this opportunity away. We definitely need to care about the health of our city, of Torontonians, and the planet. So full steam ahead.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other members? Okay, we have the recommendations before us, moved by Councillor Cressy. All those in favor? Yes, Councillor, you can. Please indicate your support. Councillor Davis, Councillor Mihevc, Councillor Cressy, Councillor Wong-Tam, Councillor Fragedakis, Councillor Layton, Councillor Perks, Councillor Troisi, Councillor Matlow, Councillor McMahon. Thank you very much. We have to go back to TE 28.6. Councillor Layton, this was your item, 722, 750, 783 College Street zoning amendment application final report. I believe we have to reopen the item.
Yes, okay. My apologies. I should have moved the recommendations in the supplemental report, not just the original staff.
All those in favor of reopening the item? Any opposed? Item is opened. Go ahead. And now we're voting on the recommendations in the supplementary report. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. We are still at 10 a.m. items. You folks out there are very patient. We are now at item TE 28.8, Cooper Street Extension, City-Initiated Official Plan Amendment, Final Report. We have a list of speakers. May I please call up Marcel Pereira?
Madam Chair, before we begin deputations, I'd like to move to refer this item to staff to report back in the first quarter of 2019 on a consultation strategy for the official plan amendment that includes 55, the Esplanade, and 1 Church Street residents. Why I mention this is because I know there are people here who want to depute. Because this is a statutory planning meeting, I understand that any person who speaks at this meeting would not be able to speak when the item comes back up. So I recommend that people not speak at this meeting so that they could address the issue after public consultations have taken place.
Okay, I want to make sure that everyone in the chambers is aware of what is happening at this point in time. So Councillor Troisi would like to refer this item.
Yep.
And there's a request for the speakers who have been waiting to perhaps wait a little bit longer. You will have an opportunity to come back when this item is before this committee again, first quarter of 2019, after some additional work is done with staff. Okay. Are there any members of the public who still need to speak on this item today? Or would you like to wait until the 2019 opportunity?
2018.
I'm told 2019.
2019, oh.
Can we please confirm the date? Is it coming back the first quarter of 2018?
2019.
19?
The councillor is correct. It's, the intention is that we have time to relaunch this, and it comes back after the election.
Okay. So it's actually the first quarter of 2019. Are there any members of the public who need to speak to this item today? Can you? I don't see any. Okay. Point of order. Go ahead.
Motion. Don't I have them?
I was just wondering procedurally, how do we move things into a new term of council? Oh, okay, great. I just wanted to know that for my own.
Yeah, so this motion is perfectly in order. All those in favor?
There's some things you can do.
Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. TE 28.9, 140 Winneba Avenue, official plan and zoning amendment application, final report. We have a speaker, Tim Jessup. Tim Jessup, Weston Consulting. Okay, seeing none, are there any other members of the public who are here to speak to this item? Any other members of the public who are here for this item, 28.9? Seeing none, we'll bring this right into Community Council. Ward 32, are there questions of staff?
Yeah.
Councillor McMahon? Councillor McMahon, we're on item number 9, 140 Winneba Avenue. There are no speakers. How would you like to dispense?
Okay, and you will recall this, and especially Councillor Perks, because he was concerned about this. So we are, it's my church in the beach that has a space beside them. They'd like to do a parking lot. So now now they're reconsidering the initial idea, and they're going to work with Toronto Parking Authority as per our recommendations. So I'd ask your support on that to revisit it, refer it back to planning as per the recommendations, staff rec.
Are you moving the recommendations in the supplementary report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. All those in favor of the recs in the supplementary report? Okay. Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. TE 28.10, 413, 435 Roehampton Avenue, official plan amendment, zoning amendment, rental housing demolition applications, request for directions report. We do have speakers. Dean Wise. Dean, are you here? Followed by Carlin Webb. Hello. Nice to see you. You will have 5 minutes when you're ready. The clock is on your left-hand side. Okay.
Else? I happen to be living right next door to where this development begins. So if I knock on the wall, my neighbor can hear me. So I have a vested interest in this. We have a developer who's never going to live on this street and doesn't care about the impact of his money-making venture will have on the community. And our area is not in the primary growth area, and yet he strongly wants to put in what appears to be an apartment complex. My concerns, first of all, there are 10 semis, 8 of them have sold to this developer. We're fortunate to have a long back lot that is all green space and trees. If this is put in, then we no longer have a place, an enjoyment of our yards. The wildlife will disappear, and I think a lot of people might not consider this, but we do have a row of apartment buildings facing Eglinton, which are between us and Eglinton, and all of the people living in those apartments enjoy that space also, which will disappear if they're if their proposal for 35 stacked townhouses and two-story houses goes through. What that really means is on our block alone, there are 43 other residences, and this will increase the density by over 50% just on our block. The second point about this, traditionally, we do get water runoff in the spring, and with heavy waterfall or rainfall, it collects in the lower parts of this back space. Once these are in, or once they've put in the 45-car parking lot underneath this structure, I'm not sure where the water will go, but I'm sure some of it will definitely collect in our backyard and further west at the other end of this development, because we already have a problem with our infrastructure isn't able to handle the drainage issues this could cause. And I think the developer might be aware of this, but long ago we had a stream, this is probably in the 20s, that came through our area, and the solution was to bury the stream. So there's already a lot of water under there, and I think it would cost a lot more maybe than this developer might be willing to invest to put a correct solution to this problem. So I think I've always wanted a swimming pool, but I don't think this is how I want to approach it. My second point is directed at the streetscape on Roehampton. 40 years ago, when my husband and I moved in, it was a regular, typical neighborhood. We raised our kids, we knew our neighbors, and it was lovely to have that little space and yet be able to walk one street over to Eglinton and go shopping. Our kids could walk to school, we could go to restaurants. But now I notice our street is serving a much bigger function than it ever did just for the neighbors on our street. And I think this is even more important. It's actually turned into a bit of an oasis for the increasing number of apartment dwellers and the condo owners that are exponentially multiplying at the Young Eglinton core. And these people are enjoying our residential streets while taking their kids to the park and school and going shopping. And this adds a vibrancy to their and our lives. I love the idea when somebody can walk down the street. It's sunny, we've got lots of shade trees, conversation's easy. We all benefit from that. And if we decide we are going to take this or intensify, and we don't fall in the primary core of Yonge and Eglinton, if we're going to intensify on our street, then some of that will be taken away, and the people that are coming into the core will not have the benefit of that residential feel. A lot of times, because we parallel Eglinton, many walkers and bicyclists use our street as an alternative to Eglinton, and it's much more enjoyable to drive along a leafy street than on a busy concrete treeless center fairway.
Your final thoughts, please.
I'd like to see that we preserve this because it's already in place. Why get rid of it? And it's important to my livability and to all the prospective people moving into the young Eglinton area. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the deputant? Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Our next speaker is Lillian Wong. Lillian, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. My family and I have lived on Roehampton for more than 11 years. My house will be right across from the proposed development. We're happy the City Planning Division opposes the proposed development. The neighborhood should be designed properly according to city bylaws. We all know the developers are seizing on the provincial policy of intensifying development along Eglinton LRT line. But do we have enough parks, schools, and daycare spaces? Do we have enough green spaces? The questions can go on and on. We just do not have the infrastructure and amenities yet to support more growth. The fate of this proposed development is now in the hands of OMB. We need all the councilors' support. We need all the support we can get from the city solicitor and the city staff to make sure OMB will also oppose the proposed development. The size of the proposed development should be modified and reduced to fit with our community. We do not want this proposed development to set a negative precedent for the future. We love our neighborhood and we want to continue living here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Thank you, Lillian. Our next speaker is E. Ann Coates. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I'll reset your clock and you'll have 5 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you very much, and I'd just like to say to the councillors and Madam Chairman, thank you for your patience in listening to us today. I know I'm exhausted and I haven't done anything, so thank you very much. I'm a 17-year resident of Roehampton Avenue, and I have paid parking afforded me by the city. When I first drove down Roehampton to look at my house, it was filled with trees and it was quiet. And I know we have to change. I used to work in the field, of change management, and I understand it pretty well. But what I'm really struggling with, again, is the nature of that change, that in terms of the capacity or the overdevelopment of this proposal, it will be much higher than any of our residential buildings, and we do have residential buildings on the street, not apartment buildings. There will be 35 units, from 8 units to 35 units going into that property, dumping probably an equal number of cars and traffic onto the street, which has already increased tremendously. So I have concerns about that. Parking, although I have permit parking, that's only for overnight, and often even then it's difficult to try and get my car in a little spot. And I can't imagine what it's going to be like if we have a residence like this or an apartment building and all the additional cars afforded or trying to find places on that street, even though they are allowing for some parking. I'm also questioning that we're going to the OMB at this point, and having heard you speak about this earlier, I have some really strong concerns. We've had no opportunity for input to even adapt the plan. There was one meeting, and now it's going to the OMB. And it seems to me that, you know, if we're really trying to retain our neighborhoods, we should have some say as to how that goes forward. So I really want you to support the Healthy Neighborhood Built form and the neighborhood policies of the official plan, and do everything you can to give us that opportunity to have some say in how this goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, are there any other members of the public who are here to speak? I will call upon for Dean Wise one more time. Dean Wise? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring this into Community Council. Members with questions of staff? Seeing none, members to speak? Councillor Matlow.
So I'll begin with moving the staff recommendations to send the city solicitor and relevant staff to the Ontario Municipal Board. And the reason I do so is that the planning report speaks for itself. This is clearly an overdevelopment of this site. It flies in the face of our official plan in so many ways just cited by the deputant. And it threatens the very stability. An apartment building of this size with back-to-back stacked townhouses threatens the stability of the neighborhood and clearly adversely impacts the character and the quality of life of the street and the quality of life of the residents who live on this. I just want to say a little bit, just very briefly, but just for a moment about even just the experience that one has on Roehampton. It's very true, and the residents spoke to this, how closer to Yonge and Eglinton, within the urban growth center, It's an apartment neighborhood. It's busy. It's growing. It feels like a perpetual construction zone. And then if you get a little bit east of Mount Pleasant, as you get towards Rollinson, it's a stable neighborhood. And where we have the Northern Secondary School field, which we invested in to make it into a publicly accessible quasi-green space. And then just down the street towards Bayview, you've got the Charlotte Mar Park, which we just built a new playground at. And all the neighbors know each other. It's a very close-knit community. And they're depending on us to stand up for our official plan and support the staff recommendations. So therefore, I know that you will, and I appreciate your support today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other speakers? Seeing none, there's the recommendations in the report in front of us. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. TE 28.11, 66 Wellesley Street East and 552570 Church Street and city-owned public lane official plan and zoning amendment and rental housing demolition applications refusal report. Are there any members of the public here to speak to this item? This is item number 11. Okay. Seeing none, any members with questions to staff? I don't see any hands going up. Members to speak? I would just be moving the recommendations in the staff report to refuse the application. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. TE 28.12, inclusion on the City of Toronto's Heritage Registrar, King Spadina Properties, Ward 20. Are there any members of the public here to speak to this item? I don't see any. Any members with questions to staff? Seeing none. Members to speak? Councillor Cressy?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to move staff recommendations. And I'd just like to note, because this comes up around here quite often, this is a batch listing of 94 properties which have been identified as contributing within King Spadina. These are the same properties that we put in place an interim control bylaw for a heritage study bylaw last December, which is coming to a close next month. With this addition to the registry today, we're going to ensure that they're protected going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any questions of the mover? It's basically staff recommendations. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Okay, we're at 11 o'clock items. TE 28.13, residential demolition applications 65 Ontario Street. Speakers, we have a gentleman by the name of Tom Halinski. Welcome.
Good afternoon. And with me is Mr. Jazzy Karana, who acts as our client's consultant. We're here for Bell East Corp., which is the owner and the applicant. I'll be brief because I know that the members have my letter dated yesterday, came in late yesterday afternoon. It's in the additional communications receipt package, and it outlines our client's request. It also encloses two structural engineers, structural engineer and a geotechnical engineer's report that pertains to this matter. Quite simply, our client is asking for a demolition permit for a single house on its property ahead of the issuance of a full replacement building permit. Our client has obtained approvals under the Planning Act, has now executed the site plan agreement, and has applied for those replacement building permits. They just haven't been issued to date. The goal of Municipal Code Chapter 363, which is the reason that we're here, is to make sure that houses aren't torn down without a replacement being built in due course. That's the opposite of what's happening here. The request for demolition is to facilitate that redevelopment that's now been approved by the city and subject to site plan. Our client recognizes that the property next door, the house next door at 67 Ontario, is very close and touches in some places at the roof and at the foundations. The existing home, which is the subject of the demolition request, and to recognize that and to deal with it, our clients retained a structural engineer and a geotechnical soils engineer to ensure that this is done, the separation and the demolition is done safely and without any damage to number 67. As you see from the letters attached to my letter, that that's not only feasible, but as McClimate Rack has indicated, is a rather routine procedure for structural engineers. Their conclusions are that there will be no damage, that as long as things are done in the process outlined in the engineer's letter, the demolition isn't going to not only cause any damage, it's not going to cause any settling or any effect on the adjacent structures. It needs to be done carefully, step by step, and by hand, and that's exactly how it's proposed to be done. And you know, to be frank, these issues would be things that we need to pay attention to, whether we were here at council asking for permission or whether this was just a permit being issued by the building division in due course. I simply wanted to assure council that our client is attuned to them and has them well in hand. So with that, and subject to any questions from you, I would ask that you support the alternate recommendation in the staff report, and we would ask that the permit be issued subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the speaker? Okay. Seeing none. Any other members of the public here to speak? I don't believe so. Any questions of staff?
Yes, city planner. They still here?
Don't go away, Linda. Come on back. You have one of 3 jobs to do. Okay. Okay. When you settle into your chair, I think Councillor Troisi has questions for you. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor.
Okay. I understand the applicant has received statement of approval for site plan and satisfied those requirements for first building permit, shoring and excavation. Is that correct? Great. And then my other questions are for the building staff. I also understand that the applicant will be in position to receive first building permit, shoring and excavation within 2 to 4 weeks?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. We've been reviewing the application and anticipate being able to issue the first permit very shortly.
So even though this application is technically to approve demolition without a replacement building, in fact, the applicant is very close to satisfying that condition, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And in your experience, are the undertakings promised by the applicants to address concerns about possible effects of demolition appropriate standard practices in these circumstances?
They certainly are, and we also will review that for conformity when we issue the excavation permit for the vibration control bylaw in the building code.
Great, thank you.
Any other members with questions of staff? Okay, Councillor Troisi.
So I move to approve the application to demolish the existing dwelling with staff recommended conditions.
Okay. All those in favor of the alternate recommendations? Do we need to see that on the screen, or? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Yeah, alternate rec number. Okay, so we're heading into TE 28.14, application to remove a private tree, 119 Hayward Avenue, Ward 30. Members of the public, is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, questions of staff?
Staff are asking to withdraw this report, Madam Chair.
There's a request from staff to withdraw this report, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And Councillor
Withdraw the item.
Councillor Fletcher is moving it. All those in favor? Withdraw. Okay, any opposed? I don't see any. That is withdrawn. TE 28.15, request for offense exemption to the Toronto Municipal Code, Chapter 447-53, Fermanagh Avenue, Ward 14. We do have speakers, Josh Gitalis, followed by Jim Domage. Josh, are you here? Welcome. The clock is on your left-hand side, and when you have a moment, you're settled down, I will begin it for you.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Hi there. Thank you.
Go ahead, your clock has started.
So we proceeded to build a fence on either side of our deck. We demolished our deck originally and built 2 fences on either side. As you can see in this picture, and there will be more pictures coming up, it is completely in line with the extension of our neighbor's house on our west side, which is 55 Fermanagh Avenue. These were one of the original plans, and we did send this to our neighbor at 55. It was actually set to be at 12 feet to completely block out their extension, and there was no objections to this until much later. Okay, this is another view right from the back showing that it's in line with their extension. This was an email. I will highlight the writing. I know it's very small. You'll be able to see it in one moment. This was an email sent to Jim and Marilyn, our neighbors at 55 Fermanagh, on June 9th, 2016. And there were a couple clauses in there. First, as well, the back storage room that sits on our deck was built without a permit and is rotten. Below it, under the deck, is a pile of wood and other damp debris with live wires and uncapped pipes that extend into the house. The deck is also unsound and dangerous due to extensive rotting. This was also confirmed by a report. Jim, you had mentioned the aluminum siding on the side of your extension. That will become even more prominent on our side once we remove the storage room. We will be putting up some sort of lattice along the side and a fence, and we'll be happy to review the plan with you before anything is purchased or installed, which we did. We outlined all of the work that was going to take place. We sent all of our plans. We included removing and rebuilding of the deck and garage. Both are rotten and extremely unstable and unsafe. Removing the small addition that was tacked onto our house, and there is no foundation to where and no permits for it originally. Our contractor provided a letter indicating that upon demolition of the rear addition at 53 Fermanagh, we observed that condition of the neighboring addition to be inadequately built and weather sealed. As a result of our contract, we had determined that there may have been some remedial repairs. This was not the case. We observed the sheathing was purely installed and not providing any protection once we removed addition for Megan and Josh. That's myself and my wife. The crawl space under 55 Fermanagh was not sealed and completely exposed to the elements. In order to complete our scope of work, we received cladded neighbor's exterior wall with marine-grade plywood with a board and batten finish, followed by an exterior stain. We also cladded and sealed off the crawl space, provided all new drip edge aluminum flashing at the roof line and caulking. The work was discussed with the neighbor, Jim, and approved verbally prior to installation. All costs for labor and materials were absorbed by my clients, Megan and Josh. We paid for all of the repairs for that. This is a view of our backyard before we put the work in. We built the new deck, and we had put a fence on both sides. Okay. This is what it looked like again after the deck was demolished. This is another view of what was going on Jim's side of the fence. That's 55 Fermanagh. And as you can see here, you can see the before and after picture. The fence did not end up going right up to the roof of their extension. It just started lower down and went in line to be more aesthetically pleasing for both neighbors and ourselves from both sides. That was the before. And again, this is the after. You can see the before on the left and the after on the right. And it just goes completely in line with that extension. There's another view of it. And there's another view as well. This was a letter from our neighbor at 51 Fermanagh, indicating that they have seen our fence and are okay with it and think it's aesthetically pleasing.
Thank you, Josh.
And then finally,
Your final thoughts?
We got some signatures from various neighbors showing them pictures of the work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the speaker? Okay, seeing none, our next speaker is Jim Domage. Okay.
Can I submit one more picture?
Sure. Do you want us to photocopy, or would you like to put it on the screen? The overhead projector, I'll just stop your clock for now. If you place the image on the overhead projector, the clerks will provide you some assistance.
Okay.
Okay.
When I get to that point. Sir?
Why don't Josh, if you can just take a seat back in the public gallery.
Sure.
And Jim, if you want to scoot over 3 seats, 4 seats, you can be right next to the projector. Great. When you're ready, you just place the image on top of the overhead there.
Yep.
The image should be facing up, facing you.
Thank you.
Okay, just as if you were reading it. I'll restart your clock. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm Jim Dolmage. My wife was here at 1:30, but I guess these things don't always take place on time. She had appointments, so could not stay. If you go to page 8 of the city photos serve very well to illustrate the issues with this structure. That back deck is the entry to our family room, which has a sliding glass door and a large window, which is adjacent to our kitchen. So we spend most of our time in that room. The structure that they've put up blocks the sunlight onto the deck as well as into the windows. You can see we have a little privacy fence there at the end of our deck. It's 5 feet high, 5'5" actually. The structure particularly cuts out the sun in the wintertime, which is when we really want it. The back deck roof was designed, and that opening was designed to maximize sunlight in the wintertime and a fairly large overhang to cut down sunlight into those windows in the summertime. Looking at that photo further, the second issue for us is an issue we never had before this structure went up, and that was living permanently with raccoons. If you look at it, it's, is that on now? I'm not sure how well you can see that, but you can also tell by looking at the picture, those slats are nominal 2-inch wood, which means they're actually 1.5 inches. The gaps between the slats are also 1.5 inches. The original proposal said that those gaps were to be 1/2 inch, which makes more sense. But as it is, it's an actual climbing device for raccoons. We had a raccoon on that roof all summer, and you can see from that picture, in spite of what Josh said, that the structure doesn't go up to the roof. It does go exactly up to the roof at the front edge of it. In the wintertime, there are raccoon prints in the snow on the top board of the structure. And last winter, the first time ever, we had raccoons destroying shingles and attempting to enter our attic. I would suggest that a small child, which Josh should be very aware of, would also be able to quite nimbly climb up that structure with the 1.5 inch gaps that are in there. The third issue is, and Josh showed the pictures of the old structure that was there, and it had metal cladding on it because there was part of their house that was adjacent, and it was an old shed which they tore down. And we did agree that they could replace that siding, but it was my understanding that there wouldn't be a flammable structure beside our wall. As Josh mentioned, they replaced it with board and batten, just plywood and batten strips. But if you look back to the picture on page 6, we now have a large flammable wooden structure adjacent to our exterior wall with a barbecue parked next to it. This is a dangerous situation in terms of our property. So in sum, I do believe the wall is illegal in its height. It is certainly ugly. It certainly infringes on our light. And lastly, I would suggest that as built, it is also dangerous. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I think you have a questioner, Councillor Mahevik.
Yes, on the sunlight piece.
No, actually, Jim, if you could have a seat, you actually have questions from
certainly, sorry,
member of council.
I'm wondering how the sunlight is negatively impacting your side, because it's in the picture that I saw before, there might be a little bit at the end here, but your wall is, your side of the wall is, there's no windows there, is there?
If we look at that, yeah, it doesn't show them clearly, but the picture on page 8, is that what you're looking at?
Yes.
Yes. So that 5'5" wall is at the end of our deck. Immediately adjacent to it, on the other side, is a full-height window, and beside that are sliding glass doors. So in the wintertime, the sun, when it's low, comes right through what used to be an opening there.
How much does it protrude?
Your
neighbor's...
It's even with the end of, it doesn't look like it here, but it is even with the end of our privacy fence there. The end of their fence is even with theirs.
So, sir, I don't see the sunlight issue then.
Actually, okay, can I put up another picture then? I didn't think I'd need to use this, but this shows more clearly. This is what we see when we look out of our deck, when we look out of our windows.
I see.
The screening effect is considerable. It reduces 50% of the light.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you.
Is that all of your questions, Councillor Mahevik? Anyone else with questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we'll take it into committee. I don't know, does anyone have any questions for staff? Seeing none, Councillor Perks, this is in your ward.
There's some saying about fences and good neighbors that
have a motion?
is clearly not true. Yeah, I'm going to be moving recommendation number 1, which is to refuse. My general approach on these is where neighbors are able to agree, then it's okay to grant additional height on the fence. If both sides of the fence line, everyone can agree, we'll waive the requirement, that's fine. But where there's a dispute, I don't take sides. I go back to the basic city bylaw, which is 2 meters. It's unfortunate. I wish this could have been worked out between the neighbors and didn't wind up here. It's never pleasant in a neighborhood that we wind up at this point, but that's the best judgment I can bring to an issue like this. So I encourage you all to support the motion number 1, which is to refuse.
Anyone to question the mover? Seeing none. Anyone else to speak? Seeing none. Okay, so I guess we'll take the vote. All those in favor of the motion before us? Those opposed? There's 2 opposed or 1 opposed? No? Okay. So that carries. Thank you. That concludes that item. The next item is, just a moment. Sure. Before we go to the next item, which is 28.16, request for a fence exemption at 23 Forest Hill Road, can I have a motion to add TE 28.96 to 28.99? Councillor Cressy's moving that. All those in favor? That carries. Okay, so now we can go to the request for a fence exemption at 23 Forest Hill Road. I don't have anyone listed on the speakers list. I'm just wondering, is there anyone here to speak to that item? Please come forward. Okay, I still don't see anyone. Councillor Matlow, seeing no one, what would you like to do with this item?
Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, I'm going to be moving this to deferred sine die. I haven't heard, I was actually waiting to see if anyone would come and speak. I haven't heard from anyone about this at all from the community. So we'll do what we can to understand why they want this and how they want this and what the context is. But until then, I'm not willing to move to approve it. So I'm going to defer it sine die.
Yes, I think that's what he means.
I'm going to put it here. So
Are you asking to move this, defer it indefinitely? I'm being asked by the clerk.
That's right. So it can hover, and then I can reach out for it if we want to bring it back.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to defer this matter indefinitely. All those in favor? All those opposed? That carries. Okay. Next item, 28.17, request for a fence exemption at 36 Berryman Street. I have two speakers listed, a Robert Hiscock and a Larry Hewsome. Is Robert Hiscock here? Please approach. You have 5 minutes. And I'm going to pass the chair over just in time.
Hello and good afternoon. I'm coming to see you. I'm the owner of 36 Berryman Street. We put up a new house. We put up a new fence. We put the fence to the same height as the back neighbor's fence, along two of our neighbors, and the same height as occurs between Bishops and Berryman Street at the back. So I have if the photo here I'm showing you is the top of our fence, that's on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side is the top of the old fence. So we're a couple inches below what was there before and what is still there. And then I can show you the larger version, just to give it context. The new fence is our fence. The old fence is the fence at the back. We've had it inspected twice by the city inspector. It's fine for safety and security and all that. That's the finished product from the inside. So we built to the height as was there, and that's about it. Any questions?
Are there any members? Thank you very much, Robert, for your deputation. Councillor Davis has questions for you.
Trying to understand who you are.
I'm the owner of the house.
You're the owner of what?
36 Berryman.
36.
Right.
And your application, hold on, I got it wrong. You're 36 Berryman. Right. Okay, and you are seeking to build a fence that exceeds the height allowed under the bylaw.
Right.
At 2.62 meters. Instead of 2. 2.62 instead of 2 meters. Okay. All right, you are 36 Berryman.
Councillor Davis, do you have a question?
Well, I was trying to understand exactly. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the deputant?
You know what?
No? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker on this item is Larry Hewsome.
Yes.
Hi, Larry. Nice to see you.
Hi. Let me just hook up my computer.
I'll start your clock.
So I'm Larry Hewsome. I'm the owner of number 34 Berryman. I'm immediately to the east of the property, and the one that impacted the most, mainly because of the way the sunlight comes in and so on. I'll just start by giving you a couple of comments and a couple of emails that demonstrate what I've done to try and get agreement on the fence, and I'll end with some images of the site. This is, for example, the email that began really in the very beginning when Mr. Hiscock was looking for support for his application. It was significant variances with aggressive setbacks, and I supported it because I wanted to be a good neighbor, cooperative neighbor. And you can see even back in 2015, I brought up the issue of sunlight and what could be done to mitigate the impact of sunlight. In 2016, I asked to be consulted on the fence when the fence was being demolished. Here's another email where I was told that the fence would be well in excess of the bylaws, and I attempted to engage my neighbor. He ignored all my attempts and just simply said he's building it according to the height of the other 3 fences. At that point, I simply said, well, you should conform to the city's bylaw. In one email, they said the fence would be 8 feet high, and I said, well, I'm not agreeable to it, and again said, you should conform with the bylaw if you're not willing to engage. Here's a text I sent to the construction project leader, showing him what the bylaw is, and said, I expect you to follow it since you're not willing to talk to me about the fence height. In desperation, I said, finally, I'm willing to accept a fence height of 7 feet, completely ignored again. So what they've done is they've gone ahead and built the fence, completely ignoring me through all this process. And I will just show you a couple of images of what's happened. So here's the early construction. You can see all the scaffolding, everything is on my property. Again, good neighbor, a year of this, all on my property. Even afterwards, after scaffolding's done, everything is on my property to build. His eaves trough, all his ladders, everything. I've been just a tremendously cooperative and supportive neighbor. Here's the old fence. That's the corner of my house. You can see the fence is about 5.5 feet high solid and 2 feet of lattice work. And this is a fence that he asked to tear down to do his construction, and I agreed he could tear it down. This is a new, same view with a new fence. And you can see he has a balcony there. In his application, he said privacy is an issue. I will show you what privacy means. So not only does he have a 2nd floor balcony, but he actually has a 3rd floor balcony. So in terms of privacy, everybody else is more impacted than he is through his construction. Here is the other side of the fence now. This is the far corner of the fence. And what he omitted to show you was that his new fence is actually much higher than the old fence. And here it is. You can see his new fence compared to the old fence. It's actually a foot higher. So I don't know what he's talking about. You can see it's black and white, old fence, new fence. Here's my garden. I'm an avid gardener. Sunshine is important to me. I made every attempt to engage him to try and come to an agreement. He completely ignored me. Once he's got his building application, got his building permits, I was history at that point. So I've been courteous. I've been trying to be helpful. And here's what the fence looks like from my side. You can see it's completely unacceptable. So I ask you do not reward this bad behavior. I ask that you tell Mr. Hiscox that we're a civil society and you have to speak to your neighbors. And if you want to vary from the bylaw, you should negotiate and get agreement from your neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the speaker? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Larry. Are there any other members of the public who are here to speak to this item? No? Seeing none, are there any questions of staff? Okay. I actually have a question of staff. With respect to the notice of violation that was originally issued, I believe it's now been, I believe it has now been settled. Is that correct?
That's actually incorrect. A notice was issued in July 2014 as a result of a complaint. The officer went out, confirmed that the height of the fence exceeds the height of the bylaw, and subsequently the owner applied for the application for the fence exemption.
And have there been attempts made to remedy the dispute between the two neighbors? Like, obviously, it's much easier if the neighbors can agree to a conflict as opposed to us disputing on it or deliberating on it.
Not to our knowledge.
No. Would it be helpful for the neighbors to come to a resolution?
Absolutely.
That would be recommended?
Recommended.
Because although the fence violates the municipal code, it doesn't appear to be in contravention of any provisions of any other bylaw, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any other information that you can provide us to give us any assistance today?
I might be able to speak to both parties offhand and suggest outside mediation.
Do you have questions? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Fragedakis, with questions.
Yeah, sorry. Can you tell me what is the allowable height? What is the height of the fence that the resident or the applicant at 36 Berryman could build this fence to?
It's 2 meters is the maximum height in the bylaw.
So what is the height of this fence?
This is a height of 2.62 meters. It exceeds by 0.62 meters.
So if they were to lower their fence by 0.62 meters, then they wouldn't be in contravention of the bylaw.
That's correct.
So if they were to, okay, so thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to defer this item for one meeting cycle and encourage both neighbors to continue to work with one another. We will be able to see this application as it comes back in January 2018. Any other speakers? Councillor Davis?
I'm sorry to do this, but I would suggest that there doesn't appear to be any interest in any kind of compromise demonstrated here today. And I think that there clearly were attempts to resolve this matter. And so I would recommend adopting. You know what? I'm just going to vote against.
Okay. I think it's always best to allow neighbors to try to come to a resolution. I recognize that sometimes these are very difficult discussions, but I hope that by way of deferring this item and asking for the communities to come back together, it will give them a chance to find that resolution in a local decision-making environment. So this item is now deferred until the January 16, 2018 meeting. All those in favor of the motion before us? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Our next item is TE 28.18, request for a fence exemption, 6 Rose Park Crescent. We have speakers Marty Hall and James Gillis. Hi, Marty, welcome. And I would just restart your clock. You'll have 5 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address the complaint lodged respecting the fence that I had erected on August 10, 2016. To give you a brief background, I purchased 6 Rose Park Crescent in June 2008. The home required some significant renovations, most of which I've completed. I've always obtained appropriate permits from the City of Toronto and cooperated with my neighbors in performing renovations. With respect to the front of my house, as can be seen in this photo, and in from the survey dated June 21st, 1961, 6 Rose Park Crescent had a solid hedge as the boundary that separated it from 103 Heath Street entirely. I have photos of the home when I originally purchased it, as can its historical view be seen on Google Maps. The current satellite photo of September 2015 is representative of what the properties looked like at the time Mr. Gillis purchased 103 Heath Street on September 15th, 2015. 103 Heath Street was at all times a legal duplex with an additional nanny suite. It has a grand double entrance in the center of the home, as well as a side door beside the garage that faces completely onto Heath Street in a triangular fashion, covering almost the entire irregular lot. The entire back wall of this structure, that measures approximately 80 feet, sits less than a foot inside the property line between the houses, or on the property line up to its greatest setback at the front, measuring 4.5 feet. The upper unit is accessed by an entrance that was constructed on the property line at the back of the house, facing Rose Park, that was once separated from my view by a hedge that privatized this area and blocked access to the side of 6 Rose Park. A walkway solidified the property line from the base of the steps at 103 Heath Street East to the edge of the retaining wall that front Rose Park Crescent. The hedge was at least 2 feet thick and 6 feet high, and aligned this walkway right from the front of 6 Rose Park Crescent to the edge of the property at the sidewalk. If you review the survey for 103 Heath Street, you will see that the only land that does not have either a building or driveway on it is the small 15 by 25 section that was previously blocked from my view. This area right here. The rest of that is his house, an entire building. I did undertake some landscaping, replacing my front steps and the majority of my original brick retaining wall under the authority of a permit in June 2012. I left the hedge in place for privacy, as well as the edge of my retaining wall on the city portion of my property, as removing that particular section abutting 103 Heath Street involved addressing the encroachment of the steps that were there at the time. The front of my yard was a very pretty and private place for my family to sit and my children to play. It has a large patio where there's a table and chairs where we often used to sit and enjoy the garden. My ability to have quiet enjoyment of that property after Mr. James Gillis purchased the property were significantly diminished and effectively eliminated. In December 2015, I returned home to find a bobcat and workman digging up the entire side yard bordering 103 Heath, and that they had cut down my entire hedge. My entire property was now exposed to an open field of mud with debris, equipment, and contractors. All of this was done without any prior discussion with me. Mr. Gillis and his contractors had not even bothered to introduce themselves before they began vandalizing and trespassing on my property. In an attempt to keep the focus on the fence, I will not go into all the concerns that I have respecting Mr. Gillis's continuous harassment of my family. Mr. Gillis and his contractor have been served with a plaintiff's claim with respect to this incident.
Sorry to interrupt. I need you to focus your remarks on the application before us, okay, on the report.
I notified Mr. Gillis in advance that I wanted to install a boundary fence. The bylaw requires him to share the cost and requires that the fence be placed on the property line. Because Mr. Gillis had removed a back porch and wanted to reconstruct it, I agreed to put this fence on my property. Now Mr. Gillis has complained about that agreement and is asking that the city force me to reduce the height of the fence. The privacy that was provided by the former hedge is not replicated by the current fence. The hedge that had been on my property was removed without my permission. I installed this fence in a manner that was compliant with the bylaws governing a flankage fence. Obliging me to lower the height of the fence effectively removes the opportunity for me to again have the quiet enjoyment of my front yard. I never asked for any alteration to my landscape and have never been consulted on what Mr. Gillis has constructed against my express directions not to even trespass. Obviously, I was not able to replace the hedge that Mr. Gillis cut down while he was doing construction.
Your final thoughts, please.
I am suggesting that I was and am entitled to the hedge that I had prior to Mr. Gillis cutting it down. I seek to keep the fence that stands from the front of my house covering the back of 103 Heath. I'm asking that I be given this exemption under the interpretation that my fence be deemed as a front yard fence.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions of the speaker? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Marty. James Gillis. Okay,
Good afternoon.
You'll have 5 minutes.
Sure. Interesting municipal governments in action. Councillor, staff, thank you for your time. I'll try to keep it really brief. In my view, the fence has an adverse impact, and that's why I'm here. It's 2 meters high, 6 feet 6 inches high, and it kind of travels up the side of my walkway into my house. And so now I have a 6 foot 6 inch fence and a wall on the other side. The fence is on the south side, so it kind of blocks the sunlight from coming in, and it gives it a bit of an alley kind of ghetto feel. I'd prefer for it obviously not to be there. Ms. Hall and I don't agree on much, but I'm sure that we're not the first neighbors to suffer that fate. Ms. Hall is right. There is an issue with respect to the hedge, and she is suing me in court for that, but I consider this to kind of be a separate issue. When she was planning the fence, we did talk about it, and I did offer to pay for half the fence, but I wanted to talk about what kind of fence would go in and some of the details, and she waved me off and said no, she was going to go ahead and build her fence. When they were in the process of putting in the foundation holes, they knocked out a couple of my clay downspouts to evacuate water from the house, which I was upset about. And, you know, we were talking about it on our front lawns, me on my side, she on her side. And she said if I didn't get out of the way, she was just going to go ahead and build the fence in the front to 6 feet or 8 feet, and that I should more or less be gone. I was clear, though, that I knew the bylaw at the time, and it should be 1.2 meters and not the 2 meters that she wanted to build or the 2.6 meters that she threatened me with. But she went ahead in any event. And I was clear from the beginning that I didn't think that this was a good idea, and I was unsupportive. So here we are. The fence went in. I complained that it is in excess of the bylaw, that I do believe there is an adverse impact, and I prefer for the fence to have the height that it should have under the bylaw. It was, you know, kind of a classic spite fence installation. And I won't get into the details, but that's what it is in sum. You know, it's two neighbors disagreeing. The fence is kind of there, and I think it should conform to the bylaw. The previous hedge never measured 6 feet. I'm 6'4". It was more or less up to about just over my waist, so it was about a 4-foot hedge before.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Are there any questions for the speaker? No, seeing none. I have a question for you, sir. With respect to the hedge that was removed and that actually in the photo, it actually does look like it represents much taller than 4 feet. You just pointed to your armpit, but it actually looked like it's...
From the street, it's higher than that. So there's about a 2-foot retaining wall, and then, you know, at that level, there would have been the hedge, which it didn't come to my shoulder for sure. As I recall, it came to just above my waist. For sure, it wasn't as tall as me.
But if the hedge had if the hedge had a 2-foot retaining wall plus another 4 feet on top of it, well, you would be at 6 feet anyways.
But the fence that's currently there is on top of the 2 feet that's above the. So like we have the 2-foot retaining wall, and then there's the 2-meter fence above the retaining wall. So from the road, it would be 8+ feet.
That's how it would read from the road, is what you're saying.
From the road, yeah. So those pictures are taken from the road. That's why it looks a little bit taller than it is.
Is there any way, I mean, just like the application that was before us with respect to the request for the fence exemption, is there any possibility for the neighbors to come together? Like, now I recognize that I just heard you say that you folks were also in legal proceedings.
Yeah.
However, this is a fence, and sometimes fences make good neighbors.
I'm not opposed to the fence, and actually I think that it's probably a good thing to have a fence between us. I just think that it should, you know, match what the bylaw requirements are. I'm not saying that I hate the fence and it should be pulled down. I think 1.2 meters serves the same purpose as 2, and she actually only said 2 when I was complaining that she had messed up some of my drainage. That's what drove the decision to put in an 8-foot fence. I don't think, sorry, a 6-foot fence. It doesn't look good on her side, and it doesn't look good on my side. She was just upset with me that day.
But your property, the property that you have is recessed further back than where 6 Rose Park is. Is that not correct?
No, mine's so mine's a bit further. So we're talking about the entrance on my side.
Well, your entrance is recessed back, correct? You have a side entrance.
I do.
And so this fence that is from the elevation of your front door reads like a front yard fence.
Yes.
As opposed
and from
to
hers is the same. She enters at the front as well. For both of us, it's a front yard fence.
But it reads as a side yard fence. When I look at this fence, it reads as a side yard fence to me.
No, it's a front yard fence for her, and it's a front yard fence for me. Neither one of us, that's a side yard.
Okay. Are there any other, are there questions, sorry, are there members who would like to speak? Those are my questions. No? Okay. I'm going to move that, that we adopt this fence. The way I look at this image reads like a side yard fence, and I recognize that you have one entrance that is off on the side, and it is on the side of your house, and the Rose Park property has an entrance on the front of their house.
Is it her house that's, is it her house that's a side yard fence too? Or like, how do we read these bylaws? Like, it's clearly her front yard.
Yeah, we're not, we don't get to have a conversation at this point.
All right.
We've just brought everything into the community council. I've asked community council members if there's anyone else who'd like to ask questions, anyone else who'd like to speak. Seeing none, I'm ready to move the recommendations to approve the fence. Okay. And I read this fence as a side yard fence. I know it's rather difficult simply because there's two different types of houses before us with two different types of entrances, one that's sort of sitting off on the side and one that's sitting directly on the front elevation. And I read this as a sort of a closer to a side yard fence. If I was to be walking along the street of Rose Park Crescent, it would never occur to me that that would be treated as a front yard fence. And by that, and this is one of the reasons why I'm actually moving to adopt the recommendation to approve, and also because I'm hearing that the neighbors perhaps cannot find a resolution on their own. I don't necessarily take any pleasure in making this decision here. I've always encouraged people to work together collaboratively in the community. That's where I think neighborhood disputes can be resolved. But given what I have before us, rather than asking the two residents to go back and to continue their conversation, I'm just going to make a decision here. And if the members of the committee choose to support it, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, you can do as you please. All those in favor of the recommendation? Any opposed? That carries. TE 28.19, request for a fence exemption, 21 Roxborough Street West. We do have a registered speaker, Milos.
Sorry. I was just wondering if we could, I have a mom with a baby here, and I was wondering if the baby could depute. I'm not sure if we can jump the queue. I realize everyone's been waiting all day. It's just,
so there's sorry, gentlemen, there's a request to vary the order paper. We do have a deputant who has a young infant. Oh, there's two of them, sorry.
well, one over here is deputing.
So if,
sorry.
With the indulgence of community council, what
not to be ageist or anything.
Yeah, so there's a request to vary the order paper. We're now moving to address TE 28.22, request for a fence exemption to the Toronto Municipal Code, Chapter 447-19, Beaumont Road. First speaker is Tanya Day.
And we're happy to hold your baby, especially Councillor Davis. Is happy to hold the baby.
Oh, thank you. Oh, how kind of you. Well, she's made friends with you already, so she knows you. Thank you. Oh, she's coming to you. Thank you. Thank you, councillors, for your support today. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. We did all our work with building permits in 19 Beaumont, and everything was approved. And then we built a fence that basically is the same, actually lower height than the previous extension that was there. Both my neighbors on either side have either an extension or decks that follow a similar footprint as my deck. I'm sorry I did not bring pictures, but my application did include pictures. So a few points. One is I have a child and I stay alone at home a lot, and we're completely open to the north side, which is Eastwood Road, while on our deck, and can be viewed by all passerbys. So So we've built this fence, which is slightly higher than the allowable amount, as I understand it, and the deck follows the same footprint as the extensions which I have on both my north and my south side. Without going into all the other reasons, I want to share with you the letter of support that I have from both my neighbors on both my north and my south side, and they're completely okay with the fence that I have. Hopefully that will suffice for you to consider this application to allow me to keep my fence. That's all.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who are here to speak to this item? Okay, seeing none. Questions of staff? Members to speak. Councillor McMahon.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move the recommendations to grant the fence exemption and thank Tanya and, what's your daughter's name?
Aria.
Aria for a long day.
Thank you so much.
All those in favor of
just thanking
the motion before us, grant the exemption. Any opposed? That carries.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, now we're heading back to TE 28. Any other babies? No? Okay. TE 28.19, request for a fence exemption, 21 Roxborough Street West. Welcome back, Milos Pavlovitz.
Right. And Alex Lazit, he is a contractor, and we were both the agents of the Lonti Ebers.
Okay. You have 5 minutes.
What we want to show you, first of all, is the context of this whole thing. We will start from the back. This is the back garage, and I would like council members to look at this different height. We are in the middle, and then the left and right, the land slopes down. So then when we go through the garage, this is the second view, oh sorry, this way. You will notice these steps. So the height of the fence that is really exceeding is really only here within the garage. The fence slopes or lowers as the land goes up. And thirdly, what I would like to show is this view. These are, you will see on this view, this is the backyard, and the garage is here, and these are the walls that are totally overgrown with the trees and stuff like that. The reason why we are here is really the neighbor left of us, number 19, who during the construction, this was a massive construction that took place here about 2 years at length, and he has went to City Hall and submitted about 85 complaints of various kinds. And the reason why we are asking council to grant this is really a privacy. This man since sold the house, and there is really none of the both left or right neighbors are opposing this particular height. So I'm here to answer any questions that you have, or Alex will ask and refer to any sort of construction questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the speaker? Okay. Seeing none, are there any other members of the public here to speak to this item? I don't believe there are any. We are still on item number 819, request for a fence exemption, 21 Roxborough Street West. Okay, thank you. Members, do you have questions of staff? Seeing none, members to speak. I do also believe that that any complaint has been withdrawn. There are obviously no other speakers here before us. I would move that we grant the fence application, the fence exemption. Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. TE 28.20, request for a fence exemption, 204 Seaton Street. Michael Walker to speak. Michael, welcome. Okay. You can both take 5 minutes if you like, or you both can share the 5 minutes.
I think we need only 5 minutes.
Okay, go ahead. I'll start your clock. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. We are the homeowners of 204 Seaton Street between Dundas and Gerrard, and we back onto Osconauten Lane. So we built this fence in our backyard mostly for safety for our family because of the activities that do go on in that neighborhood. And this past summer, we got a building permit or a permit to install a pool in our backyard. And when our Eddie Capucci came to do the inspection, he noticed that our fences were above the city bylaw and suggested that we apply for an exemption permit. So we did so, and in the meantime, we also got letters from our neighbors on either side of us getting their approval for our permits for the extension. So we have letters, and we did supply the letters and pictures of the fencing in our property within that application. So here today, we are just here to supply the letters and to apply for the exemption.
Okay.
Thanks. I think we originally put up our fence was a bit higher because we had people hopping from yard to yard, and there's a lot of theft. We documented all the crimes that have gone on in our backyard and front yard in the last. So when we originally built it, our neighbors were happy with this, and we didn't really know we had any bylaw issues until we had the city come and they passed our inspections, our permits for our above ground pool. At that time, they suggested we apply and do everything legally with you guys.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the speaker? Okay. Councillor Davis? Okay. Are there any other members of the public who are here to speak to this item? Okay, seeing none, bring it inside. Questions of staff. Councillor Davis?
Just want to know that it meets the swimming pool bylaw fence requirement.
It does meet the requirements of the swimming pool portion of the fence bylaw, correct?
Four-sided.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Members to speak? Councillor Troisi?
Yeah. I acknowledge the seriousness of some of the issues that you're facing. I really do. I'm familiar with where you live. So I'd like to defer it so that I could, I support it in principle. I just need some more time to speak with the police and some safety design experts just to get their information. So I'd like to defer it for the next meeting, next month's meeting.
Okay.
January, is it January?
All those in favor?
Next cycle.
Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Our next item is TE 28.21, request for a fence exemption to the Toronto Municipal Code, Chapter 447 at 79 Seymour Avenue. We have two registered speakers, Duncan McCrae and Gail Shields. Duncan McCrae, are you here? Gail Shields, come on up. No? Okay. So you're not speaking? Okay, not a problem. If there's no other speakers, then we'll bring this inside. Members with questions to staff? Members to speak?
I'll just move the fence exemption. Move to approve it, yeah.
All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. We are on TE 28.23, request for a fence exemption to the Toronto Municipal Code, Chapter 447 at 245 Eastwood Road. We have one speaker registered, Antonella Mega. So you're choosing not to speak then? Okay. Are there any other members of the public who are here for this item? Seeing none, we'll bring this inside. Any members with questions of staff? I don't believe there are. Councillor McMahon?
Yes, and I would like to move recommendations to deny this exemption.
Okay. All those in favor, recommendation on the screen. Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. TE 28.24, request for a fence exemption to the Toronto Municipal Code, Chapter 447 at 239 Kenilworth Avenue. We have one speaker from the public, Robert DeLeese. Robert DeLeese. Welcome, Robert. I will set your clock, and when you're ready, you have 5 minutes.
Councillors, so my wife and myself, along with our 2 young daughters, moved into this home about a year ago. Our home backs out into a communal parking lot where it's easily accessed through that driveway that you'll see up here, that anybody can just walk or drive down with no barrier. We recently put in a swimming pool, and we decided to raise the back fence, not only for privacy but for safety as well, just because it can be accessed very easily from the back way. Originally, the builder had built a sliding door for an extra parking space, which we had removed, and we removed the sliding door completely just for, again, for safety and for privacy concerns. The extra height of the fence doesn't really interfere with anybody, as it doesn't block any views, nor does it interfere with anybody's ability to enjoy their backyards. And again, we do not back on to any other neighbors, so really it doesn't interfere whatsoever.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Are there any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, no other members of the public to speak. We'll bring this inside. Members with questions of staff. Councillor Davis.
Fence, swimming pool fence bylaw. I don't see a fence between that separates the house from the pool.
I can answer that.
So in this case, the back wall of the home is the 4th fence?
That does not constitute a fourth.
We've actually installed a gate that closes the back door. I don't know if I have a picture of that, but there is a gate that we have to, when we open the back door, we have to open another gate to get into the backyard.
And that's in this covered section back here?
It's underneath the deck.
Show us a picture.
I don't have a picture of the gate itself. I might have it on the other piece of paper. Let me see.
I don't want to draw this out. It's just we worked hard to win this bylaw, and I want to make sure that it's got to be a self-locking.
Absolutely, it is. It's a self-closing gate.
Yeah.
Let me see if I have a picture of this somewhere. There are no pictures. Maybe I.
But it's somewhere under there.
Where are we? This is in my home.
Oh. That's why I can't find your gate.
So I'll show you maybe.
Are you Kenilworth?
I am at 239 Kenilworth.
Okay. Okay, there are no pictures.
So when you come down the side walkway, there is a back door that we exit from. It's basically a ground level basement. And when we open the door, there is another gate right in front of it that's self-closing, which was approved.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Members to speak?
And I would move to grant the fence exemption.
Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. TE 28.25, front yard parking appeal. Oh, that was dealt with, I think. TE 28.26, front yard parking appeal, 52 Elmore Avenue. We do have a speaker registered, Jennifer Glover. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi there. I am the owner of 52 Elmer, and the reason that I am asking for this exemption is because we actually have an electric car that is solely electric, and we need to be able to plug it in. And it can't just be plugged in with a regular extension cord, it actually needs to have a proper plug-in. you know, we firmly believe in the climate action plan that you guys have put in place, and that asks residents to reduce their emissions. And I will say that by driving this electric car, our family reduces their emissions by 5 metric tons a year. But by having to get rid of this, we will actually be adding 5 metric tons a year, which kind of goes against the climate change action plan. Anyhow, I realize that this is asking a lot, but I would really appreciate the ability to plug in our car. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Don't go away. There are questions for you. Councillor, hang on, Councillor. Just hang on. If you have questions, folks, if you have questions of the speaker, you can put your hand up. I'm acknowledging Councillor Mihevik first.
I wonder how Gord's going to vote. What is the material that you're making the front yard parking? Which are you proposing to make?
Well, I had actually proposed something, I don't have the drawings with me, but it was sort of a loose gravel type substance which enables the water to seep through.
Right, okay. So it's not built yet. You would like to build it, and you're proposing non-permeable, permeable material as its base.
Yes.
Thick, granular and all that.
Exactly, yeah.
It's a good product that I'll tell you about, if this passes. Okay. No, it's not my cousin.
Any other questions? Councillor Layton?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, so you already own the car.
Yes,
where
we
do you
do.
charge it currently?
Well, we haven't been able to move into the house. We're still in a rental because of this.
And where do you charge it at your
rented-
rental?
Sorry?
Where do you charge it at your rental?
Our rental, we have a driveway, and so they allowed us, or the place that we're renting from allowed us to put in our Tesla charger there.
So you installed a charger at a rental property, aren't they? Like
Yeah.
10, 15K to put in?
No. The Tesla actually gives you the charger at the time, and it was about $1,000 to have an electrician hook it in.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Davis?
When you bought the house, did you know you were going to buy an electric car?
We did have a plan to, and actually when I bought the house, the woman, I mean, I can't really drag her in here, but the woman that I bought the house from had owned the house for almost 50 years and believed that we would not have any issue getting pad parking because everyone else on the street has it. So it was the idea that we actually believed that we would have it. The people on the north of us actually have a driveway to the back of their house. The people on the left of us have a massive tree, so they are the only people other than us on the street who do not have parking either in a garage or a front pad. But I know that that's inconsequential at this meeting. Really, I'm just asking to be able to plug in our car.
This is your house?
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? No? Thank you very much for your deputation. Members with questions to staff? Any questions? No? Members to speak?
Thank you very much.
Councillor
I'll
McMahon?
speak, and I'll be moving the alternate recommendations. And I'll remind us, we did support Transform TO unanimously. A big chunk of that is allowing for electric vehicles. We did have a motion at council last week, or an item at council last week, from Public Works about electric vehicle charging stations. Unfortunately, we're rolling them out slowly. We have a pilot with 2 charging stations on residential streets in Ward 32. But to me, it's too slowly. You have someone who's trying to do the right thing, and I would ask your support. Excuse me.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Perks, then Councillor Matlow.
Thank you. I'm going to be moving the staff recommendation to deny. In the process of developing Transform TO, we looked very carefully at the question of electric vehicles, and there's a plan for how quickly electric vehicles come into the city based on the limits of the electrical supply. It's simply not feasible to quickly transform the vehicle fleet to all electric or all hybrid, not possible. We would blow out our grid if we did that. What the plan imagines is beginning the transformation with large vehicle fleets, delivery vehicles, City of Toronto vehicles. 20 or 30 years from now, we can imagine the transformation to privately owned vehicles as a large portion of that. But one of the assumptions we made in that is that the portion of automobile ownership had to decline sharply again so that we would have capacity within our grid to do it. Another of the things that we look at, not just in Transform TO, but in previous studies in preparing for climate change, are all the issues of adaptation. And very, very strongly, our staff, our water staff in particular, have told us we already have too much hard surface to be able to handle the projected microbursts. That's the intense rainfall in short period that we're going to be experiencing more and more often without overloading our sewer system. And the water department, who was one of the stakeholders who originally suggested we stop giving parking pads, very vigorously spoke up at that point to say you cannot start converting everyone who has a car to having the right to a parking pad on their property to accommodate an electric vehicle. So Transform TO never imagined that community councils would start granting these. Further, as you know, if you've been listening to water staff both here and at the the Public Works Committee, while there are semi-permeable pavements, no pavement at all is even half as permeable as the soft landscaping that it replaces. And that permeability decreases over time as you park 1.5 tons of plastic and steel on it. So no, I'm afraid I just, as much as I respect the intentions of the applicant here, good public policy says I just can't support establishing this trend.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parks. Councillor Matlow, followed by Councillor Davis.
I'm going to support the local councillor and the appellant, but I wanted to actually just make mention of something that I think we all agree on, notwithstanding our differences of opinion about some of these appeals. I've heard in cases in my ward, and I'm hearing this again today, real estate agents providing information to prospective buyers that give them the impression that they're getting something that they don't automatically have a right to, and they're making plans in their lives based on what they believe they're going to get. And that's just fundamentally wrong. And I'd enjoy, not today, but I'd enjoy a conversation with some of you, whoever's interested in having this conversation, about what we can do to make it very clear to Trebinet's members that that kind of behavior, the real estate board, that kind of behavior is unacceptable because it's playing with people's hopes and dreams and finances and lives. And one after another, whether it be a parking pad or other variables that people think that they're walking into and they're not getting, that's just unacceptable behavior. And I just think it's fundamentally wrong that this is happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Davis.
I believe Councillor Perks moved a motion? Okay, I'll be supporting Councillor Perks' motion. I look at this house with this beautiful big green front yard and a large tree in the front, and I read a report that says not much, but there is still some parking available, permit parking on the street. And secondly, that our forestry, urban forestry, has determined that the proposal has a negative impact on the trees in question and would not support the proposal. So if forestry says it is going to impact trees, I think that's an added consideration. We can't just start saying, oh, we're going to have an electric car and therefore we're going to start getting rid of whatever soft surfaces we have left in our neighborhoods. We can't. So, you know, this person and I heard that they bought the house with some assumption that they were not going to have a hard time getting a front yard parking pad. What I know is that front yard parking pads, everyone knows how hard they are to get from, at least that's what my neighborhood all knows, how hard it is to get a front yard parking pad. As far as the real estate board goes, we did meet with the real estate board some years back. We asked for changes. I am very happy to convene a little working group to talk to the real estate board. But whatever we say to them, there are ways that real estate agents can be sanctioned, and there are other things that can't be done. And all I remember was that we left quite frustrated that we weren't able to achieve anything with the real estate board. And it really does just fall to a purchaser to do their due diligence when they're purchasing a house. And to think you're expecting that you're just going to be able to put in a parking pad automatically, I think was unfortunately wrong. And I can't support that. We cannot start paving over front yards because they're electric vehicles. We need a systemic approach to it, which we're developing. Yes, it's too slow, but I wouldn't pay the price of green space to try and expedite it on a case-by-case basis like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Councillor Cressy to speak.
I'll be very brief, and I suspect because we have a new councillor in the chamber here with us today that we're spending more time on this one. There are different environmental needs being portrayed here as either or, and it can't be. We have serious environmental needs as it relates to green space and the corresponding green water or stormwater management. And then we also have real needs related to carbon reduction. And we do see long-term that electric vehicles will play a role. However, while they are both good, we cannot put ourselves in a position of saying either or. And we cannot put ourselves in a position of a domino effect saying that everybody gets a parking pad if they have an electric car. Can you imagine the impact that would have on our stormwater management? This is compounded in this situation by the very real environmental impacts that our own urban forestry staff has said this would be harmful to a tree. And so for those reasons, I can't support it. But more than that, what PWIC is looking at currently as it relates to electric vehicles is on-street charging stations, because we don't want to do it at the expense of green space. And that is still far too slow, the approach we have to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We have motions before us. Anyone else interested in speaking? Okay, so we have the motion from Councillor McMahon to approve. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, and those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That loses 3 to 5. What's that? No, he wasn't here. So now he's here. And then Councillor Perks has a motion to refuse. All those in favor to refuse? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those opposed? 3. And that wins 6 to 3. Thank you very much. We are moving on to TE 28.27, front yard parking appeal, 74 Scarborough Beach Boulevard, Ward 32. We have a speaker, Take Kratskov. I'm very sorry. I'd like to blame it on the handwriting, but I don't think I can. It's just me. So welcome. Okay. And you have 5 minutes when you're ready.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. So my name is Talka. I'm the owner of 74 Scarborough Beach Boulevard. I have applied for the parking pad. And in addition to, I think, what you have in front of you with the application, I would like to ask you to consider the following. I do work out in Mississauga, and my job requires me, in addition to the commute, to often come home late. So that is around 7:30 or later, which, as a female, walking down the streets is not always comfortable. As you can probably see in the document in front of you, our street has actually given out more permits than there are spaces available. So it's 172% over the spaces available. So I often do have to park a couple of streets down. Again, walking down there at night is not always comfortable. Now, I know I'm not the only one who has that problem, obviously. In addition, I'd just like you to consider, I do have a hip issue. I have severe arthritis in my hip due to hip dysplasia. I've already had a major reconstruction, but I'm looking at hip replacement in the next year, which will obviously for that time make it even harder to obviously walk long distances. Hence the request for the parking pad. There is no tree on my property, so it wouldn't impact any of that. The walkway already has the permeable stones, so it would be using the same stones to extend that to a full parking pad. So with that, I would like you to ask you to consider the alternative recommendation.
Okay. Thank you very much for your deputation. Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none. Any other members of the public here to speak to this item? No. We will bring it inside. Questions to staff? Councillor McMahon? No. Members to speak? Councillor McMahon.
And I'll move the alternate recommendations and ask for your support.
Okay. And Councillor Perks?
Move the recommendation to deny.
Okay. All those in favor? We have two on the floor, folks. Councillor McMahon's motion first. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. Votes against, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That loses 3 to 6. Councillor Perks' motion on the floor to deny. All those in favor? That's 6. And those opposed? 3. That carries. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. TE 28.28, front yard parking appeal, 90 Wheeler Avenue.
Sorry, I'd like to defer this sine die.
Okay. Motion to defer? Are the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Indefinitely.
So are the speakers that are listed, there's 3 speakers listed, they're all not speaking?
No.
Okay. All those in favor? Motion to defer? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. T 28.71, bus loading zone and one-way operation, Trinity Street. There is a speaker, Michael Brewer. Michael is not here, I think. Ward 28. Any questions of staff? No. Members to speak? Councillor Troisi?
I'll adapt staff recommendations.
Okay. All those in favor?
Adopt, rather.
Okay. Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. Don't go away. We've got some other business here. Yep. Item number 51, which is installation of on-street parking and parking prohibitions, Ward 20 and 28. It was held by Councillor Cressy.
I think we're ready to move the staff recommendations. Thank you. Okay.
All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. And are these still being held? 58. Okay. Okay, so we are now on TE 28.58, parking amendments, Cody Avenue, held by Councillor Fletcher.
Sine die.
Okay.
For that sine die.
Motion to defer. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. TE 28.59, parking amendments, Strathmore Boulevard, held by Councillor Davis.
Yes, I have a motion to move this on to council without recommendation. We have to sort out some small details and technical changes.
Okay. Motion's on the screen. Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. T 28.62, road alterations, Leslie Street, held by Councillor Fletcher.
I have a motion there. Clerks have a motion for that.
And what motion is that?
Oh, you'll see it. There it is there. Moving that. So approve the traffic islands and then move to do some traffic calming as well.
Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And item as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. TE 28.65, traffic control signals, College Street and Gladstone Avenue, held by Councillor McMahon. Ward 18.
Hold on a second.
It's a long way from Kingston Road in Maine.
Let me just get out my passport. What number was that again? 44?
65.
65, close. Wow, okay, we're going to defer indefinitely, sine die, while we wait for the updated studies.
Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. TE 28.68, two-way operation Charles Street West, held by myself. I would like to adopt the recommendation number 1 in the staff report, but also move an amendment, which the clerks will now put on the screen. This is just to ask staff to continue further studies, to report back to the first quarter of 2019 with those results. Make sure that there's broad stakeholder consultation and to factor in the increased density from new developments, any impacts from proposed traffic changes to surrounding streets, and to ensure that the city's Vision Zero pedestrian and road safety initiative is all embedded in the report back. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. Item as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. T 28.76, proposed installation of speed bumps, Wagstaff Drive, held by Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, I'm going to defer that until January 2016 meeting because we have to know if a forklift, no, 2018, January 16, 2018, if a forklift can go over the bumps in a laneway, and we're going to all find out that information on that day.
Great. All those in favor of the deferral?
Sorry, that says 17, yeah.
That's correct, yeah.
It's 18, yeah. I know, okay. I said 16, you said 17, but it's really 18. So
Okay.
We'll get
All those in favor?
All in favor?
Any opposed?
We'll land in the right year.
TE 28.93, 395, 387R, and
For all the coffee
413
roasters
Leslie
in
Street,
town.
official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications, request for directions report. Ward 30, Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, I have a motion, and thank staff for helping with this, to get this to council. It's going without recommendations, adding the letters from all the residents.
Okay.
And we have to see what we're doing vis-a-vis the OMB.
Okay, all those in favor of the recommendation on the screen, the motion on the screen? Any opposed? That carries. Item as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? It carries. Thank you. T 28.95, we're now back into more new items. Traffic regulations in Forest Hill area, Eglinton Crosstown.
The recommendations in the report and the letter correspondence.
Okay,
Sorry for taking so much time this meeting
that's okay.
with my items.
We tolerate you, don't you worry. Okay, all those in favor of the recommendations in the letter? Any opposed? That carries, thank you. T 28.96, new business, Spadina and 371 Bloor Street West, Site 1 full signalization, Ward 20.
I'll move the recommendations in my letter.
Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. TE 28.97, appointment of public members to the McCormick Playground Arena Board, Ward 18.
I can move the staff or the recommendations. Yes.
Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. TE 28.98, island parking on Bain Avenue, Broadview to Ingham, Ward 30.
I'd like to move the recommendation in the letters, Chair.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question? Oops.
Yes, you can.
Elastic came flying. I just wanted to know the what island parking exactly was.
Island parking is not
Like this-
on the island
It's the staggered server. Okay, thanks.
or on the island, either one. But I want the staggered version. Somebody did that. I think it was him.
Okay, we have one more item, folks. There's a motion on the motion to adopt the recommendation in the letter. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. T 28.99, the Monarch Dome Traffic Management Plan, Ward 30.
Thank you. I'd like to move this, move the recommendations that have come forward from the consultant in developing a traffic management study 5 years after the dome is now open, and the other recommendations that are in there that don't require actual bylaws, but are requests for the city to complete the management plan. Our staff have been involved in that with Toronto District School Board. So thank you very much. This has been quite a few years to come, and I'd like a recorded vote, please.
There's a request for a recorded vote. Do we need to put that on the screen, and that's been circulated?
It's circulated long ago.
Okay, so there was nothing different. Yeah, so I just wanted
Hours and
just when you were speaking, I just wasn't sure if there was something different. There was
Years
nothing
ago.
different.
It's 2016, I think I saw.
I think it was just a few hours ago. It was new business, don't you worry. Okay, all those in favor, record. Can I have the two members come back? We're just getting into a recorded vote. Okay, all those in favor, request for recorded vote. Councillor Mihevc, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Cressy, Councillor Wong-Tam, Councillor Layton, Councillor Perks, Councillor Troisi, Councillor Matlow, Councillor McMahon, Councillor Bailao. Oh, welcome back. Okay. That carries unanimously.
He is implying that it was me.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Councillor Layton, I believe you have a motion to introduce the bills.
I do. That the Toronto and East York Community Council pass and declare as bylaws bills 1304 to 1332 and 137 to 1340, excluding Bill 1320, be prepared for the November 14th, 2017 meeting 28 of the Community Council.
Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Councillor Perks, you can go ahead.
That the Toronto East York Community Council pass and declare as a bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceedings of the Toronto East York Community Council acting under delegated authority at meeting 28 of November 14, 2017.
All those in favor?
It's not about speed.
That carries. That concludes today's meeting, folks. Thank you very much to staff and to everybody else.